in the press.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what happened as a result, right after that, and maybe you caught this and maybe not, because most people didn't, Trump then gave a speech talking about why the rank and file likes him and the officer corps doesn't. Mm-hmm. And he said that I'm keeping them out of war. So he was clearly driving a wedge between the officer corps and the rank and file. Now, what happened this week was he assembled those people to see how they would react to his new pitch with his the Department of War, Whiskey Pete, giving his ideas how we should approach the Department of Defense. Trump gets on, met with silence, unlike Fort Bragg with the enlisted people. Mm-hmm. He knows now that he's got a problem with the officer corps and the senior officers. Therefore, there's a purge coming. Yep. Many of them will be forced out. Yep. And the last thing I'm going to mention is the economy right now is perfect for Trump because it's allowing him to go into rural areas to take kids who are coming out of high school who have no job prospects at all because nobody's being hired. There are no job hirings.
Throw them into ICE.
Load up. That's right. That's right.
Yep. And ICE is going to become. And here's the big question in my mind, Brian. Let's say that ICE is now on course to be. I mean, they're in a massive hiring binge right now, $50,000 hiring bonuses and all kinds of stuff. But they're on a path to become the largest single police force in America, much like Hitler's protection detail, the SS, became the largest police force in Germany eventually. It took a couple of years, but it did. And the question in my mind is, the SS initially was participating in getting the people out of Germany or rounding them up anyway and putting them in camps, that they argued were not true Germans. That was the Jews, of course, and the gypsies and queer people, that they're not true Germans. And so Trump is going after people who are not true Americans. What happens when they've got all the immigrants out of the country and we still have 50,000 ICE guys running around with guns looking for something to do? That they will do the same thing the SS did in Germany by right around 1939, 1940. They'll turn their guns on everybody else. And, what do you think?
They, of course, they're going to take an oath to Trump and not to the Constitution. I mean, the one thing that's missing here is that when you joined, I was in the service, I was in the Marine Corps, and you take an oath to protect and defend the Constitution, not the president. Teddy Roosevelt talked about that. The loyalty is to the country and the Constitution, not the president. Trump wants to change that dynamic, and therefore he's turning this into what he wants in his image and likeness, a police state controlled by him. But at the end of the day, Tom, here's what it comes down to. A third of the country did not vote in the 2024 election. That's how he won, right? And most of those people, I suspect, are suffering from his policies. If they don't get out and vote in the midterms after experiencing the pain of the policies, the beautiful bill and all that, and they don't come out again at 28, I don't know what the future of this country holds, Frank.
Well, this is why they're frantically buying up the media. This is why Larry Ellison and other right-wing billionaires are on the verge of taking control of CNN and TikTok, and they've already got the Washington Post and the Los Angeles Times and Fox News and CBS, and I mean, it's just it's a wholesale attack on the truth in America, basically, on reality in America, and whether they will be able to sustain it, I don't know. I mean, right now it seems like the two walls, the two barriers that are holding for democracy are late night comedians, and arguably just all the Democratic Party. I mean, it's like and our generals, maybe.
Well, that's right. That's right. It's they're the last line of defense.
Yeah,
they really are. Yeah. I mean, that's what it comes down to. I mean, a friend of mine said, it was a Republican, said, "Are you hoping for a coup d'état?" And I said, "I have no comment on that." But I said, as far as I'm concerned, I think we're in a position where we're losing our democracy. And the one thing is, when you talk to Republicans, they'll tell you, "Well, it's not a democracy; it's a republic." Of course. It's a democratic republic. You need the people to vote their representatives. It's the demos, the people, the Greek word for people. But they completely dismiss the idea of a democracy because they are a minority party and they know how to rule in the majority by disenfranchising voters and controlling the media, Sinclair Broadcasting and other groups of that nature.
Yeah, I get it. I'm with you. Brian, thank you. Well said. Thank you very much. In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework.
Book on the Thom Hartmann Book Report today, or book club today, is Cuban Women Confront the Future. It's an interview with Vilma Espin. Vilma Espin was the president of the Federation of Cuban Women since its founding in 1960, and was the chair of the Commission for Social Prevention and president of the Infancy Institute and the International Federation of Democratic Women. And it's a long-form interview, actually, the book. So the first question, what does socialism mean in the lives of a Cuban family, and in particular, Cuban woman? Vilma Espin. For the Cuban family, especially the woman, socialism has meant an enormous improvement to the quality of life and personal development. We should remember that until January 1st, 1959, in our country, hunger, poverty, exploitation, repression, and dependence reigned. The revolution opened up new horizons in the economic, political, and social fields, and amongst its key principles is the defense of equal rights for all human beings. The constant struggle to make ends meet disappeared, and with it the antagonism between people competing for the crumbs that could help them escape the tragic destiny that awaited the majority. Thus the family, the basic cell of society, could develop in a rounded way. Our revolution assured all Cubans the chance to exercise each one of their inalienable rights. Each citizen is assured that food prices are reasonable and that education and medical services are free. The state makes a systemic effort to improve living standards to the extent that it is permitted by the tense battle for development that we wage under blockade and constant imperialist threats. Child care facilities have been created to provide care for the children of tens of thousands of working women from the age of 3 months to 6 years. Services to lighten domestic work have been created. Hundreds of thousands of students have also received free lunch at day school and all their meals at boarding school. Hundreds of thousands of workers also receive their meals at a moderate price in their workplace. More industrial laundries and dry cleaners have been established, and more domestic labor-saving devices are available with preference in acquisition and cheaper prices for workers. Huge resources are dedicated to housing construction in urban and rural zones. We also try to guarantee recreational facilities and spiritual enjoyment to all the population. Of course, the possibilities are exciting, but also what we have achieved to date, considering our limitations, is already vastly superior to what families experienced in the past. Social Security provides an income for those who cannot work. As far as women are concerned, equal rights have certainly changed their position in the family and in society. A woman's participation in social production, because it implies her financial independence, has altered her dependent position in the marriage and allowed a change in her ideas, in the way she looks at life. The laws that govern family relations, such as the Family Code, are based on equality and guarantee the right of members of the family to participate in society, to work, study, and to responsibly educate the children in line with our revolutionary principles. This does not mean that we achieved all that we aspire to. We still have problems of a material nature to resolve, which are directly related to our economic development. There is still the need to eliminate backward ideas that some people hold, men and women, with respect to the role that each person should play within the home, the nature of the socialist family and the relationship between a couple, ideas which work against the full participation of women in the building of a new society. Obviously, the economic security guaranteed by both men and women having access to work, free health care, and education, the obvious satisfaction and confidence in oneself that equal opportunity and the chance to fully develop to the extent of one's talents, intelligence, and aptitude offer to each person, the constant motivation and emotional stability that comes from feeling useful, recognized, and dignified as a human being. Everything that socialism has brought to us undoubtedly fulfills the deepest desires of a family, particularly the woman, who until just a quarter century ago was exploited, oppressed, and marginalized in the family and in society. Question: what is the primary concern in Cuba, work or the human being? What place do women occupy within this concern? Vilma Espin: in Cuba, a country that is building socialism, the highest aim is human happiness, based on respect for the fundamental human rights of each person. That includes full social equality to education, health care, work, and professional training, with the chance to employ all of one's faculties to take an active role in society and to help develop that society, to create the material and spiritual basis for a full, harmonious life where the highest qualities of both men and women flourish. To reach those aspirations requires work, talent, dedication, and willingness from everybody. It requires constant scientific and technological innovation to assure economic and social development. Thus, each member of our society, along with the right to work and all the benefits brought by the revolution, has acquired the duty to help create the economic basis necessary for such advantages. The building of a new society and the fulfillment of new aspirations could not possibly be achieved except on the basis of work and the willingness of the whole population. And the people work with enthusiasm because work is the means for creating wealth and goods for all to enjoy. Work that is free from exploitation does require a new dimension, a quality that stimulates and produces satisfaction. To feel that you are useful and are creating your destiny, to project yourselves toward the future through your work, to cultivate the future. In a speech in January 1964, Che Guevara said that when each community work is a vital expression of their human creativity, technology, technique, and inventions.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
May we raise children who love the unloved things by Nicolette Sauter. May we raise children who love the unloved things, the dandelion, the worms, the spiderlings. Children who sense the rose needs the thorn and run into rain-stripped days the same way they turn towards the sun. When they're grown and someone has to speak for those who have no voice, may they draw upon that wider bond, those days of tending tender things, and be the ones. What are we raising children to do? What signals are we sending them? How is the next generation being empowered to lead the country, to lead the world, to lead their own lives, to treat fellow humans, fellow people? I am drawn to and recoiling from a story in Politico and elsewhere. It's not a brand new story, but it is a news story about the young Republicans around the country in New York and Virginia and Arizona and Kansas and Vermont that offers an unfiltered look at how they talk with one another when they think the only people who are paying attention are other young Republicans. To be clear, not when they think it is only a small group of friends or a family member or their own fraternity in a small group, whatever, but national young Republican leaders, what they think is appropriate to say, what they think they'll be held accountable for saying, what the culture encourages and discourages, and it gives a fascinating look. I don't bring up the story primarily to throw stones. I wouldn't want to be held for a lifetime to account for my stupidities and cruelties in my teenage years. But it does raise a question: how should we be developing the next generation of leaders? Because to be clear, if you self-select or are selected into the young Republicans, that is what you are self-selecting or being selected to be. How should we be bringing along the generation of people who are going to lead people or just live among people? Or amongst, if you prefer. My take is this. The call-in number is 202-808-9925. It's visible if I stand up. It's not visible if I sit here, but if I stand up, I can see it. As I've probably shared before, I don't know if I'm a great person. Right? My glass house tries to collect few stones. But I know I'm better when surrounded by better people. It's one of the reasons I appreciate being here, sitting in for Thom Hartmann on the Thom Hartmann program. My name is Jefferson Smith, and it's an honor to be amongst you. I don't always care about the environment. It's easier to be selfish, or care about poor people, or I'm better when I'm around people who don't want to spread discrimination. I'm better when I'm around people who do want to tend to the natural environment, who are thinking about the next or the second or the seventh generation down the line. I am better when I'm surrounded by people who love their neighbor, who evaluate their own morality and the morality of their own community and their society by the degree to which they protect the least of us. I'm better when I'm with people who don't want to deepen or further institutional misogyny. It is easy, maybe for anybody, certainly for me, to be myopic and jingoistic, to wield my white man privilege like a cudgel. But y'all help remind me, Jeff, don't be and then a bleep a word. I'll bleep a word so that Sean doesn't have to. Thank you, Sean. Jeff, don't be a beep. And you help remind me not to be. So when I see a text thread of national young Republican leaders that has too few people texting, Jeff, don't be a beep, makes me real nervous, and more than nervous, makes me real concerned, and maybe more than concerned. As Political reported, leaders of the young Republican groups throughout the country worried what would happen if their Telegram chat ever got leaked, but they kept typing anyway. They referred to black people, trigger warning, as monkeys and watermelon people, and mused about putting their political opponents in gas chambers. They talked about, trigger warning, raping their enemies and driving them to suicide, and lauded Republicans who they believed supported slavery. The vice chair of the Kansas Young Republicans used the N-word and variations of it more than a dozen times. The vice chair of the New York State Young Republicans referred to rape as epic. Another was chair of the same organization, wrote that everyone who votes no is going to the gas chamber. I'm going to create some of the greatest physiological, another text goes on, some of the great physiological torture methods known to man. We only want true believers. I can understand young people. And to be clear, the age range of the young Republicans isn't like 13 to 21, it's 18 to 40. But I can imagine, and will acknowledge, having been in conversations when I was a kid that I am now horrified by, and that I didn't sufficiently enough times in my own high school years and college years stand up for being better and stand against being worse. But I did better than these guys in that respect, I will say. But my point is not, again, primarily to throw stones. It is to ask that question: how should we be raising the next generation? How should we be bringing along our next generation of leaders? What signals should we be sending them? What responsibility, for instance, should, I don't know, let's speak not so hypothetically, the President of the United States have? What obligation, what responsibility should people who define themselves as Republicans have? And what should it tell you that this is the tenor of the conversation in the next generation of your leaders? That when we have a window to how they talk to one another, this is what we see through the window. I have said before, I I nearly conclude, I will basically say it is moved from hypothesis to theory. The current Republican Party is not in a position to police itself against its worst instincts. To my Republican friends and listeners, please police yourselves. Please work to be morally better, even when people aren't watching. And until that happens, the only accountability will be losing elections, if they still happen. My question for at least now is, what should we be doing to raise the next generation? And what should we be learning about that? The call-in number, I gave it a moment ago. We'll be back. I'm Jeff Smith.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program. Lines are open. We'll be right back in just a moment. Jeff from, is it Tawas, Michigan?
Yes. Yes, I just had a question. I had a question for you that applies to the protesting Saturday, No King's Day, number 2.
Yeah.
This is Jeff with Iowa County Democrats. We intercepted a GOP internal office memo from Manistee County, which is another rural county. And this was their response of what to do to motorists that encountered protesters. Number 1, motorists are justified in driving their vehicles through protesters to escape. Number 2, motorists are authorized to use personal force, including weapons, to remove protesters from the road and break through with a human blockade. Number 3, motorists, as militia or otherwise, are further justified in arresting and detaining the protesters. Number 4, motorists may also file civil lawsuits against protesters to recover financial damages. This was from the Manistee County Republicans. It was an inter-office memo, and this is what they recommended that people do if they encounter protesters.
Yeah, I'm glad, Jeff. I'm glad you're sharing that. I hope you'll share it far and wide. And it's on theme, right? It's on my concern at the moment. There's so much tension on Donald Trump is, and of course, justified. But what spawned him, and what is he spawning? What is the movement that has created, that has been created, is being created, and what do they instruct their own people? What do they actually believe? Not just after Fox News had a chance to scrub it up, after Newsmax has had a chance to put it on TV, after they've prepared their automatons and their nattering nabobs for airbrushed television appearances. What do they actually think? What do they actually want for the country? What do they actually want for other human beings? What is their actual capacity for compassion, for self-awareness, for self-accountability? What actually is it? And I think the more that we learn, the more there are reasons to ask questions. And that's not to say, any barrel has bad apples, but when it's coming through official channels, as you said, this is a GOP internal memo. This isn't a jerk in a comment thread, right? This isn't the stories that I was sharing were from elected members of leadership in the Young Republicans, but I appreciate it. Jeff, last word for you.
Well, no, this is just exactly how frightening the GOP has become, and how they encourage people to violence and hatred, and it's just it's scary. I've been protesting since March 24th every Saturday here in this little town, Michigan, Tawas, Michigan, and we're going to continue to do so. I mean, we're not going to stop. This isn't going to stop us. I mean, that's just where it stands.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that.
Thanks for taking my call.
Yep. We'll be back in just a moment. I will a little bit later. I do want to share some thoughts. I live in Portland, Oregon. Portland, Oregon, of course, famously besieged by war-torn streets, but of course not really. A little more beset by inflatable frogs. And what do we need to be doing to help develop the next generation of leaders, next generation of activists, next generation decision makers, next generation, of people who live here? We'll be right back, 202-808-9925. Thom Hartmann Show, I'm Jeff.
Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Donald Trump lost, voter suppression won in 2024. That's the headline over at HartmannReport.com, and just a brilliant article written by Greg Palast, exclusively for the Hartmann Report. He writes, Trump lost. That is, if all legal voters were allowed to vote, if all legal ballots were counted, Trump would have lost the states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. Vice President Kamala Harris would have won the presidency with 286 electoral votes. And if not for the mass purge of voters of color, if not for the mass disqualification of provisional and mail-in ballots, if not for the new mass vigilante challenges in swing states, Harris would have gained at least another 3.5 million votes, topping Trump's popular vote tally by 1.2 million. Greg brings us the numbers. He lays it out. You can read it over at HartmannReport.com, absolutely free. It's titled Trump Lost, Vote Suppression Won at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
Go straight to your calls. Let's hear from JC from San Pedro, California. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. Jeff, I really liked your analysis about the situation with the GOP and the Republicans. I was shocked to hear these statistics, but I just want to say something that this country, from its beginnings, has been a racist country. It's ingrained in the fiber of this country. There hasn't been any reparations or even apologies to the indigenous, to the black and brown people. It's ingrained. So even if they taught, I just want to say, even if they taught civics in school, it's very hard to teach a person to be a normal, good citizen. It comes from home. And when at home they teach hatred and racism, it's very difficult to break that cycle of hate. And even in some instances, Stephen Miller, I hear that he was brought up in a nice Jewish, family, Holocaust survivors, and see what this guy turned out to be. So
this is the thing.
It comes from home. It has to be inculcated from home.
So but what's interesting is your last 2 points run about each other. But thank you, JC. I want to reply to that, but thank you so much for the call. That of course, lessons that each of us learn from our parents and siblings matter a ton. But what I find interesting about this thread, and importantly, is it was not a family thread. And I think much of that language might have been language they didn't get from their parents. And what we know is that peer relationships can be more persuasive, more inculcating, more important in developing our worldview and our habits than our parents' views, which we can sometimes have the reaction to resist or get immune to, or they're not around all the time. I remember the debates. Anytime, I am sure there have been radio hosts any number of times when some lefty protester in Berkeley in some decade past had done something, saying, well, where do they learn this paper? They got to learn it better at home. And even then, I would have said, yeah, but we've got to build cultures outside the home. Like, yes, please, teach your children well. Crosby, Stills, and Nash had it right. But we can't leave that only to and expect it will only be done in the home, because people leave home. And when you're online, you can leave home without leaving home. And the signals that we send of what is approved by society and by medium-sized and microcultures are really powerful. And that's why the movement that has to be developed, or the movements that have to be developed, it's more than one, and it's kind of hard. It's even a little bit complicated, but some of it's kind of simple. Is we've got to require that we love our neighbor, that we are not so committed to that we are too soft to be able to win, or too soft to be able to hold people to account, that we also have to root out from leadership those who are doing it for so obviously the wrong reasons, for only power and control. Of course, there will always be ego, there will always be desire for power, there will always be desire for control. And we shouldn't think of ourselves as entirely hypocrites when we're picking the better amongst options, which I don't call the lesser of two evils. I think all of us have good and evil within us, and we try to just do the best we can and try to identify the best leaders we can and build the best movements we can and build the best cultures we can. But the reason I find this story so interesting, JC, is because it happened outside the home. And because where they're learning the behavior and getting the signals of what's okay, like, yeah, Fox News ain't helping. And certain churches, certain church teachings aren't helping. And segregated churches in the South, which have now essentially grown in dominance in our political culture, that's not helping. And that's kind of home. But so much of this is happening outside the home. How do we build cultures for young people, leadership, development opportunities for young people, where they learn to be more effective and better people? Not only selfish, not only learn how to be physically fit, not only learn how to be capitalistically effective, but also how to be good members of society. How do we do that? I think it goes beyond the home. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be right back.
This
Night in Chernobyl, the untold story of the world's greatest nuclear disaster, by Adam Higginbotham. This is from the prologue. Saturday, April 26, 1986, 4:16 p.m., Chernobyl Atomic Energy Station, Ukraine. Senior Lieutenant Alexander Logachev loved radiation the way other men love their wives. Tall and good-looking, 26 years old, with close-cropped dark hair and ice-blue eyes, Logachev had joined the Soviet Army when he was still a boy. They had trained him well. The instructors from the military academy outside Moscow taught him with lethal poisons and unshielded radiation. He traveled to the testing grounds of Semipalatinsk in Kazakhstan and to the desolate East Urals trace, where the fallout from a clandestine radioactive accident still poisoned the landscape. Eventually, Logachev's training took him even to the remote and forbidden islands of Novaya Zemlya, high in the Arctic Circle, and ground zero for the detonation of the terrible Tsar Bomba, the largest thermonuclear device in history. Now, as the lead radiation reconnaissance officer of the 427th Red Banner Mechanized Regiment of the Kiev District Civil Defense Force, Logachev knew how to protect himself and his three-man crew from nerve agents, biological weapons, gamma rays, and hot particles, by doing their work just as the textbooks dictated, by trusting his dosimetry equipment and, when necessary, reaching for the nuclear, bacterial, and chemical warfare medical kits stored in the cockpit of their armored car. But he also believed that the best protection was psychological. These men who allowed themselves to fear radiation were most at risk. But those who came to love and appreciate its spectral presence, to understand its caprices, could endure even the most intense gamma bombardment and emerge as healthy as before. As he sped through the suburbs of Kiev that morning at the head of a column of more than 30 vehicles summoned to an emergency at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, Logoshev had every reason to feel confident. The spring air blowing through the hatches of his armored scout car carried the smell of the trees and the freshly cut grass. His men, gathered on the parade ground just the night before for their monthly inspection, were drilled and ready. At his feet, a battery of radiological detection instruments, including a newly installed electronic device twice as sensitive as the old model, murmured softly, revealing nothing unusual in the atmosphere around them. But as they finally approached the plant later that morning, it became clear that something extraordinary had happened. The alarm on the radiation dosimeter first sounded as they passed the concrete signpost marking the perimeter of the power station grounds, and the lieutenant gave orders to stop the vehicle and log their findings. 51 roentgens per hour. If they waited here just 60 minutes, they would all absorb the maximum dose of radiation permitted Soviet troops during wartime. They drove on, following the line of high-voltage transmission towers that marched toward the horizon in the direction of the power plant. Their readings climbed still further before falling again. Then, as the armored car rumbled along the concrete bank of the station's cooling canal, the outline of the fourth unit of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant finally became visible, and Logoshev and his crew gazed at it in silence. The roof of the 20-story building had been torn open, its other upper levels blackened and collapsed into heaps of rubble. They could see shattered panels of ferroconcrete, tumbled blocks of graphite, and here and there the glittering metal casings of fuel assemblies from the core of a nuclear reactor. A cloud of steam drifted from the wreckage into the sunlit sky. Yet they had orders to conduct a full reconnaissance of the plant. Their armored car crawled counterclockwise around the complex at 10 kilometers an hour. Sergeant Vlaskin called out the radiation readings from the new instruments, and Logoshev scribbled them down on a map, hand-drawn on a sheet of parchment paper in ballpoint pen and colored marker. 1 roentgen per hour, then 2, then 3. They turned left and the figures began to rise quickly. 10, 30, 50, 100. 250 roentgens an hour, the sergeant shouted, his eyes widening. Comrade Lieutenant, he began, and pointed at the radiometer. Logoshev looked down at the digital readout and felt his scalp prickle with terror. 2,080 roentgens an hour, an impossible number. Logoshev struggled to remain calm and remember the textbook, to conquer his fear. But his training failed him, and the lieutenant heard himself screaming in panic at the driver, petrified that the vehicle would stall. Why are you going this way, you son of a bee? Are you out of your effing mind? If this thing dies, we'll all be corpses in 15 minutes. Part 1, Chapter 1, The Soviet Prometheus. At the slow beat of approaching rotor blades, black birds rose into the sky, scattering over the frozen meadows and the pearly knots of creeks and ponds lacing the Pripyat River basin. Far below, standing knee-deep in snow, his breath lingering in heavy clouds, Viktor Brukhanov awaited the arrival of the nomenklatura from Moscow. When the helicopter touched down, the delegation of ministers and Communist Party officials trudged together over the icy field. The savage cold gnawed at their heavy woolen coats and nipped beneath their tall fur hats. The head of the Ministry of Energy and Electrification of the USSR and senior party bosses from the Soviet Socialist Republic of Ukraine joined Brukhanov at the spot where their audacious new project was to begin. Just 34 years old, clever and ambitious, a dedicated party man, Brukhanov had come to Western Ukraine with orders to begin building what would become the greatest nuclear power station on Earth. Midnight at Chernobyl.
So during the break, it was commented in the studio that my dog has lost weight. Let me be clear, he has not. Okay, he has not lost an ounce, nor have I. And I believe when someone tells me, Jeff, you've lost a little bit of weight, I believe, and I know I haven't. I know what that means is, I know is a strong word. I have not interrogated the issue. I certainly have not been so bold as to talk about it on the airwaves. But I believe what is going on is that the impression I left them the last time they saw me was, well, that guy could stand to lose a little bit of weight. But then when they see me, and I have still human form, I can make out legs and arms and neck. Like, oh, he's not nearly as grotesque as I thought he was. He still looks just pretty okay. And they say, oh, you lost weight. I'm like, no. And I don't really know what to say. But what I'm thinking is, now I know what you were thinking about me the last time you saw me. George Bailey is here. He has not lost an ounce. Okay. He has gained probably a couple ounces, but he is still a beautiful, wonderful dog. And I love him very much. To the ounce. I love him maybe slightly more with each ounce. I try not to, but we're not trying to fatten him up. This is not Hansel and Gretel. Okay, we're not going to eat a chubby dog. We're not going to eat dogs at all. Not to cast aspersions on other people's dietary choices. All right. I have one other at the home front corner. We'll get back to Crosby, Stills, and Nash in a moment. But my dad will not be on today. I'm going to see if I can get him on tomorrow, the next day. But was also asking, is your dad coming on? I said, no, he's gone on a trip with his new 85-year-old girlfriend. Okay? They are both, for their ages, extraordinarily physically fit. If anyone knows, this is a call, it's a call for help. If anybody knows of a super senior Olympics for doubles, that where the aggregate age of competitors exceeds 175 years old, please let me know, because I believe I know the champions. And I want a range of, whatever's more than a decathlon is a dodecathlon, something that has more than 10 events. I want crossword puzzles. I would like just some standard racing, shot put, whatever, that kind of deal. But I also want, I want puzzles. I want spelling. I want definitions of words. I want dates. Okay, I want something. I want the kind of cognitive test that we wish Donald Trump would go through. This is what I would like. I would like a competition for those things for couples, married or unmarried. I'm not here to moralize. That will compete worldwide. Okay, China, bring it on. Okay, but the average, I would even accept average aggregate age of 170. But if we have 175, I am confident. I got the lead horses in the stable back home. They are ready. I mean, to be clear, they have left the stable. They've gone to South Carolina for some convention. They are able-bodied. It's horrifying. But anyway, so that's where Pop is right now. And he can't hear me because he's on an airplane with this woman, who, of course, I won't name because they didn't know they were going to be brought up. I had not planned on bringing them up. But that's what's going on with George and me, who have not lost any weight. And with my dad, his 85-year-old girlfriend. I was also asked during the break if she was a gold digger. And and as I said, I think, well, if they're going after my pop, they're more like a bronze digger, like maybe a few pieces of silver. They're more a bronze digger. But I don't think so. I think they're really into each other. They dated when I was like 2. And then they've been reunited. And now they're like kids. They're like, I don't even know. We could do a whole, I could shed every listener of this radio program by just talking about this a long time. I'm developing material. I have things. I don't know if it's for my therapist or a future book or a comedy special. It may be a mixture. I don't know. But there is something there to mine. But I just wanted to give you an update. I'm hoping to get Pop on the air tomorrow or the next day. But if it happens, he's going to be like on a mobile phone in South Carolina, in between octogenarian canoodling. Let's go to Maria from Chicago, Illinois. You're on the air.
Hi, Jefferson.
Hello there.
I was listening to your comments regarding those young Republicans and so on. And as I was mentioning earlier to the person who took my phone call, it takes a village. But here's the thing. In the village, there exists good and bad influences.
Yep.
So the question is, how do you expose your child, your children, to the good influences in their lives? And, I mean, the church, schools, neighbors, everybody is involved in the development of a child. Nothing is done by just the parents. Nothing is done by just the child. So I learned my lesson when we had the election. Who voted for the other person? And I was very disappointed because I thought I knew that person. I thought that was a good person. Now I have to rethink it. So when I say it takes a village, you have to know who it is that are going to be good influences and negative influences on your child.
Yeah.
And I don't have an answer to that because I found out the hard way, and some of these were relatives, that they are not who I thought they were.
Yeah.
So the parents play a big role. Peer pressure can play a big role. But you know what? If the child is taught to be discerning, to have critical thinking, to be exposed to civics, to be exposed to the goodness in life, that love is so important, that we must love our neighbor as God had, taught us in church, in school, right? So I don't know what the real answer is, but I do know it takes a village. It takes many people, many influences, and hopefully it's positive.
Thank you, Maria. I can't say it much better. And this is one of the reasons it's so discombobulating. Because when I was a kid, I thought that the conservative movement was a thing that was asking for personal responsibility, personal good conduct, that was asking for making sure that in home life people were taught to do right, and it appears that now it is just a weaponized movement to try to destroy its political enemies for the growth of power of its movement, without an ability to manage its own people to a high standard of morality, including its president. And that when I remember the enormous clutching of wrists and fingers and pearls when Bill Clinton had an affair with an of age but still young intern, and how much moralizing there was, and just how much and how much it was brought up that the lesson that he was teaching to people in the country, well, the president can do that. Well, if President Barack Obama could wear a tan suit, what signal is that sending of decorum to the rest of the country? And somehow it's discombobulating. I'm not saying anything brand new, but it's discombobulating. The thing I am saying that is slightly new, or that I haven't heard near enough, we've heard about we need a Joe Rogan for democracy. We've heard this. It's not that I agree or disagree with that, but I am saying something different. We need communities. We need to develop communities where people can develop to become their best selves, and the definition of their best self means also helping other people, not just being selfish, not just being jerks, not just being cruel, not just being mean, not just doing it for the lols because you can make the best Hitler joke. We need to be identifying, cultivating, supporting those communities. Like a thing happened with, so there's a lot of attention on Turning Point USA. One of the things that happened with Turning Point USA is it got significant funding. They say, oh, there's some young people who joined that organization, and the right-wing funding community just dumped dough into it. That same thing has not happened in pro-democracy circles. If you are an ambitious, promising young person coming up and who believes in science, who believes in women's right to choose, who believes that in climate science, who believes that we should love our neighbor, who believes that we should care at least something about wealth disparities, where are the repositories for you? I don't mean what's the podcast you can listen to. Where do you find community? Where do you find the place where your mirror neurons can learn lessons from? That's the kind of thing that I'm telling you because it seems mildly more useful than howling it at the moon. That this is the thing, that we need repositories of community that will raise people better. And that is not being provided by the leadership of the country. And it is not being provided by the technology leadership of the country. and somebody's got to do it. If you're a young person watching, listening to this, thank you, thank you, thank you. We're here for you. And if you're people here who have young people in your lives, help me answer this question. How do we start building pockets that will create stronger and better leaders, stronger and better citizens, stronger and better and more loving people in our country? We'll be back. This is Tom's Show.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
I'm workshopping this stuff. It's something really important. I haven't figured it out, but it's really important. 202-808-9925. Welcome your thoughts. Thanks for being you. Phil from Costa Mesa, you're on the air.
Hello, Mr. Jefferson. Fantastic show today. 2 quick points that'll bring us right back to where you want to be. We need mom and pop on the street, so we need to go from fast food to slow food.
Yeah.
As a nation, fast food nation to slow food nation, and then auto nation to bike nation. So just put cafes and bike shops on the street owned by mom and pop, and we're mostly there. What do you think?
No, it's a really good point, right? If everything is corporatized, and I'm not fundamentally knocking the corporate form, it's been a tremendous engine for wealth creation in the world. But if we are relying upon that too much, if that becomes the primary engine of morality, the primary engine of governance, if it replaces democracy, if it replaces other lessons, if we just have to hope the corporate citizen, because by the way, the ultimate corporate citizen is not a human being, the ultimate corporate citizen is the corporate form itself, then we lose a bunch. That I want an economy with more CEOs. I want an economy with more local owners. And I think you're right. Like we know from studies on city safety that if you can have eyes on the street, if you can have active local business districts where you have ownership involved, people who aren't just there, I've got to punch a clock and do it so some private equity firm can get rich, but I'm doing this because I value my community, I value my business, I value my customers. It really does have an impact on community safety. That when I start talking about local stuff just about every show is because I really do think that's where a lot of stuff happens, where we can have a lot of impact, but actually building local communities so they work for people is a big part of this. Last word for you, Phil.
Yeah, brand names. Just reach out and get some local brand names that are owned by mom and pop, and then public funding that can plug them in. GoFundMe or Kickstarter, so you don't need investors.
Yep.
And I'll just throw my brand out real quick, the Power Pancake. That's kind of like a local thing you can use.
Power Pancake. All right, man. Thanks. Good plug. We'll be back. David from San Francisco, you're on the air.
Oh, thanks, Jefferson. Yeah, I was in raising the next generation. Have you ever heard of Jubilee?
Yes.
Yeah. The concept of Jubilee, it's sort of like if you're playing Monopoly and you discover that somebody's cheating, you just wipe out that game and then you start over again.
Yep.
And in the case of what we've gone through in history, there was the ancient 3 estates, and it was the king, the military, and the church, and that they all had different forms of power, and that they were always trying to be in charge, but they would always back up each other to be able to keep the people enslaved. Mm-hmm. And so what I suggest for raising the next generation is to teach people about the ancient 3 estates and figure out ways of boycotting each of the different 3 estates. So in the case of the king, that's typically seen as money. We've got to figure out a way to change out the money. Of course, militarism has a lot to do with uniforms, and we've got to figure out a way of abandoning the idealization of clothes. And then, of course, superstition, we've got to figure out going towards truth.
Well, thank you very much for the call. We're going to break, as you can hear from the music, but Dave from San Francisco, thank you so much. And yeah, the ancient 3 estates, clergy, nobility, and the commoners.
Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. It's the great revenge. Trump's Orwellian America is taking shape. The key to it was this insane executive order titled Ending the Weaponization of the Federal Government. And basically what it does is it sets up the weaponization of the federal government. It proclaims that the Biden administration was, using the Justice Department to go after Trump people and Republicans, and it does it in a way that basically rationalizes they're doing the same thing. This is a absolute danger to our republic. This executive order and Trump's assertions around it. And you can read all about it. There's a whole op-ed about it titled The Great Revenge, Trump's Orwellian America Takes Shape, over at HartmannReport.com. Get ready for the investigations, the arrests, and the show trials. HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
Let's go to Al from Zanesville, Ohio. Al, you are on the air. I'm calling you Al.
Oh.
Can you hear me? We're at,
I guess I had my mute popped on.
Well, to keep the mute off if you want to say something.
I guess so.
That's the first rule, the mute button.
Oh, okay. I remember.
Actually, the
that.
second rule. First rule of the mute button is to click mute when you don't want to be heard. That's the first rule. Second rule is to click the mute button when you do. Well, you're on the air.
Okay. Well, the topic we were talking about earlier, I kind of had a wrestling match the other night, a long distance exchange with a family member, who is on the conservative side, and I'm not. And it was a back and forth, and I conceded, okay, we are built differently, and I think people are divided that way. I think the way we're wired is differently. So, what sort of common ground would it, serve each of us? And the thing I came up with is morality and ethics. I don't care if you're conservative. I don't care if you're progressive. Those 2 points have to be held.
Yep.
Those are what promotes our society. I was fortunate to have a mother, a very loving soul. I got my politics during the Vietnam era. Mm-hmm. I graduated in 1970. In Ohio, not at Kent State, but at Ohio U. But so I noticed they would border on the immoral side of things, mm-hmm. and I couldn't take to it. But today, the thing about my mother, she never preached. She never spoon-fed. Yeah. I mean, we had our religion. We went to church. But the most important thing you can do is live it. That's how you preach. Mm-hmm. You can't give these kids all kinds of ways what they should do, what they should not do. They'll figure it out. Mm-hmm. They'll figure it out in their own way. But just promote morality, promote ethics, and live those things. Mm-hmm. It's like, how do you get peace in the world? Well, it starts with the man in the mirror.
Yeah, no, it's well said, Al. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. No, and I'll say it, and it is, of course, related. I mean, how would it not be? But it's related to my concern that if we're going to have a shared sense of morality and ethics, that none of us will live up to it every moment. But nonetheless, a shared set of conceptions of doing the right thing. And I actually think in so many ways we do. And even those who listen who are not who don't come specifically from Judeo or Christian tradition still are impacted by a Judeo-Christian tradition. And by the way, the best lessons to Muslims and to Hindus and to humanists overlap, which is pretty close to the Golden Rule, which is pretty close to love thy neighbor, which is pretty close to just try not to hurt people, try to help more than you hurt, basic lessons of morality. So where are we going to learn those things? If churches, on the right wing in particular, are becoming so politicized, they're teaching the ultimate virtue is to defeat one's political enemy. And lauding a person who doesn't exhibit the primary virtues of that moral engine, except for his willingness and ability to undermine, to defeat, to jail, to attack, to insult, to threaten, to defund political enemies. That's the primary alliance. It is not a friendship of the good. It is a friendship of convenience. What signal does that send? And also, if the people getting all of the social media love and attention are not largely based on their morality, but based on if they're winning when the fix is in, doesn't it seem like we're having a society where so many people just want to, like, well, if they're getting theirs, the fix is in for them. If the corruption's going their way, I want to get mine too. I want to get the corruption going my way. And this happened in countries all over the world. Our country is, good or for ill, been a little bit better at that. And I'm worried about the moral lessons. I mean, it feels weird to be a radio guy talking about morality. I never thought that'd be my direction. I just talked about my chubby dog and my dad's girlfriend. But I do think there's something at stake. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is by P.E. Moskowitz. It's The Case Against Free Speech, the First Amendment, Fascism, and the Future of Dissent. This is from the introduction. This book is not anti-free speech. It is anti the concept of free speech. It's an important distinction. Everyone should have the right to say what they want. I will not argue otherwise. I am not an authoritarian. In this book, I will not argue that the United States should adopt laws banning racist speech, like the ones that have proliferated throughout Europe, for example. I think those laws are often counterproductive and end up being used against leftists instead of against racists. I won't argue that Nazi speech should be outlawed as it is in Germany. I won't argue that the First Amendment should be reformed nor more firmly upheld. This book is not about whether the First Amendment is good or bad. This book is about why the First Amendment is nearly irrelevant, except in its power as a propaganda tool. In the following chapters, I will argue that free speech as a concept is meaningless, that it is a dialectical smokescreen more than an ideal to be upheld, that in a grossly unequal society, in which a few corporations control the means of media dissemination and a small group of the ultra-wealthy bankroll entire political movements, there can be no meaningful definition of free speech. On paper, I'm free to speak as a billionaire. I am as free to speak as a billionaire. Yet I do not have the power to change laws through political donations, to influence college curricula, or to quash entire movements for economic liberation. And still, I hold more speech power than most. I am a published author, and my speech is sanctified by the gatekeepers of my publishing house. Therefore, the path to free speech, I will argue, has less to do with a law about speech, or many laws, than with ending racism and inequality. Throughout U.S. history, disparate groups have claimed to cherish free speech more than their enemies. Unionists in the 1920s saw free speech as synonymous with striking and ultimately class revolution. Today, conservatives are the group to most often shroud their politics in free speech, arguing that any silencing or protesting of their speech runs counter to U.S. values of freedom and liberty for all. But as I hope to prove in this book, free speech has never really existed, because freedom and liberty have never really existed for the vast majority of Americans. Instead, the U.S. has systematically acted against those values, suppressing the opportunities, speech, movements, and actions of the masses, especially people of color and anti-capitalists, in order to favor the free flow of capital to the owning class. This oppression and suppression have been constant since the founding of this country, and therefore free speech is a hollow signifier, pointing to a past that never existed. The funny thing about free speech is that it's been used to fight for and against these liberties, both as a guise for the wealthy and powerful to oppress the poor, like the Koch brothers and their supporters using free speech to push through anti-democratic legislation and rip apart campaign finance laws, and as a rhetorical tool for the working class to further their cause, as happened in the early 1900s when leftists argued that free speech includes the freedom to riot, and the ACLU argued it was the only way to prevent a violent revolution. I don't argue that one definition of free speech is more legitimate than the other, but that they are all relatively empty signifiers, hiding more tangible structures of power and ideas underneath them. So why write a book on free speech if I think the term is essentially meaningless? Because the concept holds so much weight in our country. We argue endlessly about whether it's being trampled on, whether college students hate it, whether the government is adequately upholding it, but we rarely ask what free speech is, or how we got to the free speech crisis we supposedly face today. When you scratch the surface of conversations over free speech, you find more difficult issues underneath. It's much easier to talk about the ability of conservatives to speak on college campuses than about the systemic racism, sexism, and transphobia college students experience. And those are the things that students who protest campus visits by right-wing conservatives are actually fighting against. It's easier to fantasize about a country that values free speech than to grapple with the fact that we place so much emphasis on free speech while jailing dissidents and allowing tens of millions to live in poverty. What is free speech to someone who works 60 hours a week and has no time nor any platform to use their supposed right? There is relatively little literature and philosophy on free speech, despite the fact that it has been in constant contention since the founding of this country. Even the legal history of the First Amendment is sparse for something so foundational to the values of our country. A few have seriously grappled with ideas of what free speech does and does not mean, most notably literary theorist Stanley Fish, who has argued that the term does not mean much at all. Leftists like Noam Chomsky have written about free speech tangentially in their explorations of media as a propaganda tool. Most history books on speech are written as hagiographies, unquestioning the intent of the Founding Fathers and their morals, with a few notable exceptions, such as Laura Weintraub's The Taming of Free Speech. I don't intend to fill the yawning gap of research history and philosophy. This is not a definitive account of free speech, but a necessary intervention, prodding us to be more critical of the term, and maybe along with it, of the other lofty concepts we must hold near and dear.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So what's happening out there in the world? This is the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Jefferson Smith, sitting in. The call-in number is 202-808-9925. I can say it again fast, 202-808-9925. Go to your calls in just a moment. And something I might want to talk more about tomorrow, but I am struck by Trump's decision to send $20 billion to Argentina. And I want to relate it to their domestic policy and to the Trump tax plan in his first term, when they changed the tax structure to hurt blue states and to help red states. I want to relate it to the Fox News strategy and the Donald Trump strategy to try to spark conflict in Portland, Oregon, and Chicago and urban centers. I want to relate that to real estate podcasts telling people to move to certain places. These things all seem different. Why are they the same? Because they're all basically doing the same thing. Reward your ideological ally with attention and, where you can, financially, and try to punish your ideological or political enemy with negative attention, or, if you can, financially. I should have given another example, which was funding for science in major universities. How is this related to the question of morality? Because punishing one's friends and rewarding one's allies, helping people that can get, who are in on your grift, and trying to threaten and scare away or eliminate the people who are opposed to your grift, has replaced what I think most of us would consider morality. And some of that, of course, is the way of the world. But it's become distilled. It's reached a sharp peak. It has become more potent and more obvious, and not just more out in the open, but more prevalent. And so Javier Milei, if I am pronouncing the name correctly, from Argentina, has been praising Trump and attacking the public funding of anything or public support for anything, and saying this is going to rejuvenate and revitalize the Argentinian economy. If we gut public services, that will, in Milton Friedman fashion, in Ayn Rand fashion, unleash the forces of magic that will make everything great. And then, well, it didn't go so good in Argentina. And the time of accountability came. We'll have midterm elections. And so Trump says, with the support of people who like this idea generally, who do want to be able to buy stuff cheap in Argentina, and who want that ideological project to continue, say, go give him some money, and then say, if he loses in the midterms, then you're going to be less likely to give him that money, which is what he did, which is not a strategy based on what's best for the United States. It is not a strategy based on aligned interests, really. It's, we want to make sure that the loud exemplars of our political project are promoted and seen as victorious. And if they're losing, we've got to cover that up somehow. We've got to prop them up. So it's not that complicated. But because these examples, so same story, Portland, Oregon. Why try to make Portland, Oregon, why say, I live here. It is beautiful. It is one of the greatest places. Let me be a recruiter. Come, visit, stay if you'd like. If you look at crime rates, if you look at measures of compassion, if you look at measures of creativity, if you look at measures of natural beauty, it's gorgeous. It's wonderful. It's one of those beautiful places in the world. In the summer, it's tied for the most beautiful place in the world. San Diego's real nice too. So is Barcelona. I've heard nice places. There are nice places in Portugal. Portland is awesome. Oregon is awesome. So why spend all this time trying to tell people it's not? Well, because you want exemplars. It's the same reason you want Reagan's name on an airport. The same reason you, at the very end of Bill Clinton's term, try to tarnish his name so there can't be a bunch of Clinton schools, because you're kind of sick of there being Kennedy schools. Because you want to, your movement recognizes, rather than competing on what is best for the most, what is actually going to lift the most people up, if you can win a rhetorical battle, if you can win the propaganda fight, and they've gotten very, very good at the psychological and propaganda fight. I'm just extraordinarily good. In part because they have the advantage of scale, because they're buying and consolidating more and more and more and more. And so the echo chamber starts sounding like truth. That's why I so appreciate you and Tom and the team of people who put on this show. Because where are the oases in the desert of meaning that has become the modern media conversation? You can't even rely on the Christian conservatives to be Christian or what conservative used to mean. It's discombobulating. So they have a very simple amorality. Reward the allies who are in on the grift, punish the enemies who are against it, even if those enemies are in the same political party. Until that political party is only the people who are in on the grift. And scare other people away so they just, hey, I just don't want to mess with it. It's dangerous for my job. It's dangerous for my family. I just don't want to mess with it. So thank you to the people who are messing with it. And we're seeing it over and over in so many circumstances. That's what I wanted to say about Javier Milei. It's the same thing. You pick on Portland because you say, aha, see, Portland doesn't work. So you try to scare businesses away. You try to scare people away. You try to lower real estate values. You try to make it that, at least in the Fox News world, which can then impact the entire conversation. Because even people who try to be neutral get skittish and think that, well, that must be roughly half right? So it skews the entire conversation. And if you can make Portland a scary story rather than an example of the way a city should be, well, then you can win your ideological argument, or have one more notch in the bedpost, or one more exemplar rather than negative exemplar. Now, I'm hoping, because my town is wonderful, that it will backfire. And so far, to some degree, it is. And thank you to Jon Stewart and others who are pointing out how silly it is that our country, the leader of our country is trying to punish a city for being an annoyance to him. Because he thinks that he could spark something. Because he thinks if they can get the bots to promote people to protest at night when judgment's a little worse, and when the nice folks are less, when the kind of the moms who protest and the old Vietnam protesters who are skilled hands at this stuff, when they've maybe gone to bed, that maybe they can get somebody to do something dumb, and then they can promote it and say, see, we told you. Portland's bad. Our enemies are bad. Our allies are good. But their definition of good and bad isn't what we've thought it was. Isn't a moral definition. The definition of bad and good is if you are aligned with my grift. Good is if you're supporting my interests in power and control. Good is if you're on my side. Bad is if you're not. I appreciate the caller who said we need some sense of shared morality. I absolutely agree. I actually think we have one. We have a political movement who is trying to twist it so deeply, and that political movement has to be defeated because they cannot self-police.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll speed around with your calls just a little bit. Varick from San Francisco, you are on the air. I think you win the Most Patient Listener Award.
All right. Well, it's well worth it. Good morning, Jeff. Thanks for sitting in for Tom. I was calling in because I just wanted to let you and all the listeners know about a YouTuber that was just arrested outside the ICE facility there in Portland today.
Yeah, tell me more.
The guy's name is Robbie Roadsteamer, and he likes to go and sing songs to, people who are just peacefully protesting.
Yeah.
So the ICE goons ran outside the facility, and they grabbed him and, drug him into there. And while he's wearing a giraffe costume, mind you.
How dare he?
Well, also he was singing and trying to bring joy to people.
Singing?
So.
Joy? How dare he?
Yeah.
The gall, that mitigated gall.
So I hope he's okay, and hopefully he'll be released soon. But, I just wanted to get some eyeballs on it, and hopefully people will go check out his YouTube site and support him if they'd like. And, that's it.
Thank you for the plug. The name was Roddy Roadsteamer, I believe.
Robbie Roadsteamer.
Robbie Roadsteamer. All right. Thank you very much. Let's go to Steve from Park Ridge, Illinois. You're on the air.
Yes. Hi, Jefferson. I'm 76. You mentioned Vietnam. I was actually in the first draft lottery in '69 following Kent State, and I kind of got my chops for street protesting way back then. And now as a 76-year-old, I think one of the reasons why there's so many gray-haired is I don't report to anybody. And I know that our country is at risk, and people my age, what do we have to lose? And everything to gain. And here's one of the things I mentioned to your screener. I live 10 minutes from the Broadview facility in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And the second day it opened, I drove over there expecting to see a bunch of folk. And I was the only car there. And I'm wondering, I thought this was supposed to be like a big deal. Well, anyway, in that short time I was there, a white van pulled up, went through the gate, and through the mesh, I could see 3 or 4 ICE goons get out, and then a man or woman dressed in orange being led in. And what I'm trying to draw a distinction between, I wake up in a warm, comfortable, safe bed, wife, dog, son, so on and so forth. And I can only imagine the hell that's going on. And you remember Martin Niemöller's famous First They Came. They're coming now for the so-called brown people and the so-called illegals. If we don't stand up to this corruption, someday they're going to come for us.
Yeah, no, thank you. And to the people who are getting out there, and want to give a plug that Free Speech TV is going to be covering live the No Kings protest. Thank you to all the people who are participating in that and in what you're doing. And bring along a friend. Find a young person. Help raise the next generation of people who will stand up for democracy, stand up for freedom, stand up for the best values of this country and the best values in this world. We'll be right back.
Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. Richard Nixon and Spiro Agnew both took cash bribes while they were in the White House. Since then, the Supreme Court, or at least 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court, made it a lot easier for politicians to take bribes with their Citizens United decision, which basically legalized political bribery as long as it's done through campaigns or PACs or super PACs. But for some people, there's just never enough money, right? Donald Trump has been running small-time hustles to make money for decades, selling sneakers, Bibles, steaks, vodka, water. But now he's hit the big time. He's got these fungible tokens, right? These fungible crypto assets, which are basically just digital pictures of Donald Trump that say fight, fight, fight. And he has turned them into an $8 billion machine. His wife is in on this too, with his Trump coin. It's a new way that foreign powers and billionaires in the United States can just shovel money into Donald Trump's pocket. There's a whole article about it over at HartmannReport.com titled Presidential Payola, The Evolution of Political Bribery. Check it out.
It's Hartmann brackets. Maybe it's not Hartmann in brackets. We are back. Back on your calls. Jim, I think now you win the most patient listener award. You're on the air.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Hey, thank you. Look, I agree with what you're saying, but I think if I had more hair, it'd be on fire because the elections are coming up, the midterms that we're all so concerned about, and the special election in California, yes, on 50, I never hear it mentioned. I never hear get out the vote.
Thank you for calling about
it. I hear philosophy, but I don't hear the answer to how the
Jim, for those of us who aren't in California. Pause just for a second, Jim. For those of us who aren't in California, when is because it's an off election day for most people in the country. When is that election in California?
November. First Tuesday in November.
First of November, this coming November. So we're about 2.5 weeks out.
Something like that, Max. And so, yeah, please.
How's that campaign going?
On what does the youth can learn to vote, and we won't have a chance to vote if people don't vote and don't get out and talk to each other about that now.
Jim, how's that?
All over the country.
Jim, hear my question real quick. How's that campaign going? How's it going on the Proposition 50? This is the redistricting initiative, the response to what they're doing in Texas, thing that Gavin Newsom put on the ballot. That now the which billionaire's kid just put a whole bunch of dough to try to defeat it. How's that election going?
Well, it was on the ballot because we had petitioned to put it on the ballot. Newsom is saying that we're behind, and he's asking for money, which is always necessary because, billionaires need things. But however it's going, people need to be given the message. It's time to get concerned with voting and educate people. That's temporary change in the redistricting. It goes back after an election cycle or two, I think. I know it's temporary. So, I want to get out and do door knocking. I don't even see any way to do that anymore. But the young people aren't listening to radio. They're listening to each other and so forth. And people that are involved with young people, they're great. But, they don't hear this is a crucial thing as far as I know. They need to hear more encouraging things because and also more warning, because this could be the end of voting in America, as Tom and you and Greg Palast. Greg Palast needs more time on the radio, and he's going to be speaking here in Long Beach with Tom this Friday. But I believe, please, let's get to the existential. All of the philosophy is not going to work if we can't even survive, and like in boxing, protect yourself in the clinches. We're in the clinching element now. We're it's time to actually get out the vote.
Yeah, and in California it absolutely is, and so good plug. And if you're in California, do vote. It is, and if you've got another election happening in your town, do say it. I will say, Jim, I heard the little dig at philosophy. I'm going to stand up for philosophy. I'm going to stand up for, and I'm going to actually make the case. My turn. I'm going to make the case, Jim, that I think that part of my critique, and it's part of my critique during during the run-up to the most recent Biden election, which ended up not being a Biden election, is we ran on democracy but didn't run for democracy. And what I mean is, we said democracy is important, but we didn't make the basic case. Right now, we have lost a shared sense of where we need to be as a country, what we need to do. And so if the only thing we do is say vote, if the only thing we do is say get out there based on a shared set of values, and we haven't actually worked to build the planks of those shared set of values, we don't make the case for a pro-social, pro-democracy, pro-environment basic set. If we just sort of assume agreement, I think we're going to have the same kind of election results that we've had recently. So that's my stand-up for philosophy. That said, heck yes, man, please vote, including on Proposition 50 in California. And according to you, you said first Tuesday in November in California. And Jim, thanks for that plug. Last word for you, Jim. Jim, any last word for you?
Oh yeah. There are other elections coming up with the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania, et cetera, et cetera. Contribute money, and I know it's and help it out, but the people have to get involved now. I'm not digging against philosophy. I think we're already convinced. Look at what Pallas said. We'd have won if it had been voted, if the votes had been counted correctly. Yeah. We've got the philosophy. Good
plug, Jim. Thank you.
I think, and I agree with you too. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Have a wonderful day. We'll be right back here on Tom's show, here on your show. Thank you so much for being part of this community. We'll be back with your calls. I'll try. I said speeder. I'll actually try to do that so we can clear the board. We're going to have Healthy Democracy on at 11. And if you do, and big agreement with Jim, if you do have an election you want to plug, call in. Let's make sure that we get it out to the zeitgeist and get out to people so that they can. You got something happen in your local community you want to plug, call the number here, 202-808-9925.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
This is Thom Hartmann Show. We'll be right back.
Pat Mitchell. It's titled Becoming a Dangerous Woman, Embracing Risk to Change the World. This is from the preface titled The Most Dangerous Woman in the Room. Yes, I'll be there. Eve Ensler was calling with an invitation to what she described as the meeting of movements, planned for the first week of January 2017. In the wake of a polarizing presidential election in the United States, Eve had decided it was time for activists to come together to shape strategies that would unify and leverage the collective power of a wide range of social justice organizations. Who else is coming, I asked. I'm not releasing the invitation list, Eve replied, but you'll want to be in the room. Indeed, I did want to be in that room, knowing from past experiences that any meeting or event that Eve organized would be meaningful. So I showed up, as the invitation indicated, at a nondescript building in Stone Ridge, New York, and surrendered my cell phone to the smiling young volunteers at the front door. Best to have all communication devices outside the room, was the explanation, which of course heightened my anticipation about what would transpire within the room. I entered a large room and saw Eve standing at the front with folding chairs in a circle. Mingling about the room were some familiar faces, the meeting's other conveners, Kimberly Crenshaw of the African American Policy Forum, Naomi Klein, award-winning author and activist, independent media entrepreneur and journalist Laura Flanders, and Jane Fonda, actor and activist. We were asked to find our seats, and Eve began. We are living in dangerous times, was her opening line, and such times call for new levels of activism from all the communities represented in this room. Let's begin by identifying who's in the room. One by one, the introductions began. I'm one of the founders of the Women's March. I'm the executive director of 350.org. I run Project South. With each introduction, the level of leadership and activists' credentials became more impressive and, for me, more intimidating. I could feel my anxiety building. How was I going to identify myself? I have no title and was no longer running an organization, having left my CEO position at the Paley Center for Media the previous spring. I could say that I was the CEO of Pat Mitchell Media with its grand total of 2 employees, including myself, but that felt wholly inadequate to explain why I belonged in that room. I mentally rehearsed some other options. I could say I was a lifetime advocate for women, true enough, if a little vague. I could list some of my previous titles, but why make a point of being the former anything? I was struggling to come up with how to identify myself in the present, an identity that would hopefully give some indication of why Eve had included me in this circle of activists and leaders. Finally, it was my turn. Before I knew it, I heard myself saying, "I'm Pat Mitchell, and I'm a dangerous woman." I'm not sure exactly what prompted this personal declaration of dangerousness, but I could tell from the looks of surprise that I needed to add a bit more context. At this time in my life, about to turn 75, I continued, I have nothing left to prove, less to lose, and I'm ready to take more risks and to be less politic and polite. As Eve said, these are dangerous times, and dangerous times call for dangerous women. That got a big sisterly yes from Eve and others in the circle, including Jane Fonda, who was sitting across from me and stood up declaring, "Well, I'm older than my friend Pat, so that makes me even more dangerous." Laughter erupted, of course, and I could sense that others were contemplating exactly what becoming more dangerous to meet the challenges of dangerous times would mean for each of us and for the work we had convened to consider. Certainly, Jane Fonda's life of activism is a textbook case for being bold and brave. During our many years of friendship, I've witnessed her willingness to take risks for a good cause, to speak out and show up, even when it meant personal peril or sacrifice. At 81, she is still on the front lines, campaigning for domestic and restaurant workers' rights, standing with the American Indian communities, protesting natural resource exploitation at Standing Rock, and busier as an actor than ever. In her book, Prime Time, Jane advanced the idea that older women have the potential to become the most powerful population on the planet. She's a great example of how we embrace that potential at every age. My personal potential for becoming dangerous is perhaps more directly linked to my friendship with Eve Ensler. From our first conversation in war-torn Sarajevo in 1998, I've been deeply inspired by her courage and her commitment to do whatever is necessary to end violence against women everywhere. Taking risks comes easier to Eve than to many. Writing and performing the Vagina Monologues, making it the centerpiece of a global movement, V-Day, to end gender-based violence, is a transformative approach to activism that I feel privileged to have experienced. Yes, I was an activist and woman's advocate before I met Eve, but through my relationship with her and as a board member of the V-Day movement, I've met activists facing dangers every day to create change in some of the most difficult places on earth to be a woman. But until that day, I had not felt dangerous myself. Declaring myself a dangerous woman still feels a bit, well, dangerous. And I readily admit to some second thoughts about declaring it even more widely and boldly as the title of this book. But every day since that convening, I'm discovering more about what being dangerous means in my life and why I believe that it's time for us, women and the men who stand with us, at whatever age or place in life's journey, to embrace risks and engage with renewed passion and collective purpose in making the world a safer place for women and girls. Pat Mitchell, Becoming a Dangerous Woman.
And we are back. Let's go straight to your calls for Speed Round. You've been waiting so patiently with your brilliance. Share some of your brilliance. Nicholas, a moderator down in Mexico. Thank you, Nicholas, for all your help. You're on the air.
Jefferson, I don't want to get into an argument with you, but I have something I think is really important to say
to
you and everyone who's been listening to you so far today. And I hope you'll be a little patient with me.
Sure.
I will try to go quickly. You have been talking a great deal about educating young Americans, particularly, to a better way of thinking and being, and I object in no way at all, zero. It is, of course, incredibly important. What I am going to say now is that I find it all to be extremely untimely. We are in the battle for America right now. And anybody who isn't getting that has simply not been paying attention to the speed with which the installation of an authoritarian form of government is underway in our country. This is not the time to be talking about educating people. Carl Sagan warned us about all of this in 1995. Now, that's 30 years ago. We've had the opportunity to better educate people, and it has failed miserably to far too great an extent. I think you can agree with me on that. What we need to be doing now is not talking about what we might be able to do in the future. It has to be about what we can do right now. And this is on the back, by the way, of a caller, I'm sorry, whose name I did not catch, right before the half-hour break, who was talking very much to this same point. And you were talking back and forth with him about, what was it, hypotheticals or something versus reality. I'm basically saying the same thing. I would encourage you to please encourage everybody listening to better understand that we are in the middle of the battle for America right now.
What should be the so if I'm talking about the next generation and I'm talking about what that means for the future, for you that sounds sort of off key because you're like, what are you talking about? There's not going to be a future.
That's exactly what I'm saying, Jefferson.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you have not been saying. Yeah. And we have to start speaking honestly to each other and in complete sentences. This is dire.
Yeah.
Jamie Raskin described it as a national emergency.
Yeah.
I listened recently to Nicole Wallace's great podcast, The Best People, with Joan Baez, no less. Joan Baez is now describing herself as an extreme pessimist. I was very surprised by that. But I do understand it, and I'm sure you do as well.
What do you think the role?
What do you speak more strong?
What do you think is the role of the next generation in that battle?
I don't think we have time for the next generation. That's what I'm saying.
Let me be more clear. Let me be more clear with my phrase. What do you think is the role of people between the ages of 16 and 35? You can pick a different age group in that battle.
16 to 35.
Yeah. What do you think what do you think the role of young people is in the battle
They're
that
pretty
you're
much
describing?
only paying attention to social media. Everything shows us that.
What should be their role in that battle?
The only role I can see that they have at this point, at those ages, they don't have much financial power yet. The only role is to protest, to vote, and I think most statistics and polls show that most young people under the age of usually 35 and under this polling are very much left-leaning.
What
I'm
social
not
movements?
terribly worried overall about that group. But they're not the ones who are going to win the battle. They're not the ones who are going to win the battle for us.
Okay, so I hear that, and that might be a place of disagreement. What social movements that were successful do we know of that did not include a significant dose, even a significant amount of leadership from the phrase I've been calling next generation? I don't mean that people that aren't born yet. I mean that next generation of leaders. And
you mean the current generation of young people?
Sure.
I think that's a better way of saying it. And I wouldn't argue that point with you at all. Listen, I'm a child of the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
I lived through the whole Vietnam War movement and the protest movement that helped to bring that horrendous war to an end.
Yeah.
And it was about young people in the streets.
There you go.
I was one of them. I was arrested 3 times.
There you go.
Not a problem. I'm not going to argue that.
So I hear you on you want to hear some urgency, and that's fair. And the caller
do.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And it is not. And I share the urgency, and I try not to have it yield towards despair. But I do want to make a case for something, Nicholas, and it is something that radio, and this show in particular, has an older audience. And as an audience I honor and appreciate being part of. And for the good of that community, I do want it to be, and I do want us to be aware and intentional and not scolded for talking about, I'll use your term, the current younger generation, and thinking about the signals.
Brian, wait a second. I in no way scolded you over that. I told you I agreed entirely about the importance of young people.
That's fair. I'll take that term away. But that it's that I do think it is worth time and attention. I think it's worth time and attention to figure out how we are, because there's a young man who lives sort of in my house, lives in the adjacent unit, and he goes to protests every night. And I see the signals that are being sent to him. And as you said, they are signals from social media. And because he's doing the protests at night, he is not seeing the now often retired Vietnam War protesters who have been through literal wars, who is not getting, and where he is getting lessons, he's tutored by rumor. He is just as likely to be getting messages. He is just as likely to be getting messages from an online bot or somebody who has read an online bot and says, hey, here's how we should do it. And that online bot might want to be winning, or it might want to be undermining the same battle he would like to see won. And so a lot of I'll add the urgency. I'll take the feedback. I take it really seriously. And I do want, particularly among our older listeners, to spend time and energy and attention. And even if it might not seem like I'm talking to you at the moment, to spend time, energy, and attention, because I think we haven't tended to our field. And when we saw when Obama lost the midterms, I watched what happened because I ran a youth organization. And I saw that we weren't investing, that the people with real money weren't investing. They're investing in other things, but weren't pouring money in to invest in what I call the next generation of leaders. And I saw what happened. I saw what happened. And what happened was, when the biggest funders for youth voting pulled away and changed their focus, what you saw was a national discussion about an enthusiasm gap. I don't know if folks remember the enthusiasm gap debate.
I remember.
What it actually was significant disinvestment in institutions and operations and in youth voting for youth organizations. That our movement has done a lousy job of bringing up what I'm calling the next generation, a lousy job of it. And we don't attend to it. And so I'll hear you loud and clear, but I do want to promote, and I do want even you, Nicholas, to be thinking about how do we build pockets that will help bring along. And I don't mean for a fight 10 years from now. I don't mean for a tight fight 10 years from now. How do we bring along folks, even in that current fight? We are going to break, but go ahead, Nicholas.
Am I still on?
Yep.
I'm not objecting to you. Of course we have to invest in the future. But more importantly, we must first win this battle for America, or we will have no time to invest in anything.
I hear you, Nicholas. Thanks for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
(202-808-9925), the Thom Hartmann Show. Roach Man from Wells, Vermont. You are on the air.
Hey, all right. Thank you very much, Jefferson. I love what you do, and I'm happy to have you replacing Tom. I have an offering for No King's Day for everybody. I am a songwriter and writer of different things. This is called The Lying, Cheating Tyrant. It goes like this. The lying, cheating tyrant goes to bed each night. Instead of saying prayers, he laughs. How can I cause some fright? Perhaps I'll sick the dogs onto some helpless sleeping folks. Or better yet, go wait and hide behind the standing oaks. The moment that the kids come out for recess, here's the plan. We'll scoop them up each one, then bind and gag them in a van. Remember, keep your mask on tight. Don't let it slip on down. For now, don't take the one zip white, but take each one as brown. I am the man, the only man, the one and only great. For I alone will fix all things that I alone will break. I have a bigly mandate from the bigly when I won. So it's not cheating when I cheat. I am the chosen. I cheat at golf. I rig most things. I push people aside. I make things up from whole cloth if my purpose still abide. I have to win. I cannot lose, no matter what, how small. Losing is for losers, though I am. Yeah, I'm not at all. Yes, lying is my stock and trade. It's stupid if you don't, for stupid people still believe, even if they won't make sense of what I have to say. I just repeat things lots. I'll add a threat, hyperbolate, then wait for the robots. They'll turn it into so-called news and say it endlessly. There's not a thing that I can't say, not even blasphemy. My lies are holier than Jesus. See? They walk on water, too. My lies are magic potions for. My lies become the truth. So when you see me, bend your knee. A gift for me you'll bring. Oh, dear sir, great one, you will say to me, and then you'll kiss my ring. You're stupider than I could be. I'd never fall with glee for such a phony, lying cheat, a tyrant such as me. So yes, I am a lying cheat, a tyrant through and through, and I am now your kingly king. There's nothing you can do. I've rigged it all. I've pulled the wool. You haven't got a clue. You'd best kneel down and bow to me. I'm coming next for you.
All right, Broach Man. So that was what was that, about a 500-word poem. Thank you very much for it. And thank you for the voices. You did the voices.
Oh.
I appreciate the voices.
Well, that's my voice. I'm a performer.
Well, there you go. We can tell. Thank you so much for the call. You got us almost all the way to break. Any last round of applause? Any last word?
I'll call back another time with my new democracy brigade. That's another whole subject, though. But thank you very much for the opportunity. I wanted to share that with everybody for No King's Day.
No, thank you. And good luck out there in No King's Day.
Thanks so much.
And that is a plug for No King's Day this Saturday, and thanks to Free Speech TV, who's going to be covering it live. This is, we talked about it when I was a previous appearance, if we can get this up to a meaningful percentage of people in the country who resist, it does have ripple effects. We need everybody in the country to know somebody who's resisting.
Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So have you noticed that the Republicans are pretty much not talking about a constitutional convention anymore? They used to be gung-ho to rewrite the Constitution. You know, they wanted to put corporate personhood in there. They wanted to change it so that women can't vote. They wanted to do away with the election of senators, repeal the 17th Amendment, take us back to them being appointed by the states. They had all these weird, they wanted to outlaw labor unions, all these weird ideas, but they've stopped talking about it. I mean, they're still moving forward on it, but it's not. Project 2025, for example, their ultimate talking document does not have one single mention in it about a constitutional convention. Why would that be? Well, it's because the Supreme Court is doing their work for them. I mean, they have overturned Article 2. They've overturned the 1st, 4th, 9th, and 14th Amendments. They've overturned Article 1, Section 7. All the details of this whole thing are over at HartmannReport.com. You got to check it out.
We are back. Thank you for being back. Let's go. Let's do it. I have not successfully done the speed round. I've not successfully done it, but we're going to try now. Ryan, at Stephen Point, Wisconsin, you're on the air.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. Are you familiar with how to use Chat GPT at all?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so I have an app on my phone. So this morning, I've been really going to it lately because sometimes I can't answer questions, so I go there and it gives me them, and I'm trying to think to myself, well, who's Chat GPT, and where did they get the answer? So you can ask it that, and they'll give you the answer where they get their answer. So, anyways, that's how that went. So I lived in Argentina a long time in my life. I own my own business, believe it or not. I'm way up in age.
We're in speed round, so give it to me quick. I'm going to try to get to a few calls before the break, but give it to me.
Okay. So this morning it was asked, he couldn't answer, why did the administration give $25 billion to Argentina? So what you got to do, people, is just go in there to ChatGPT and put, can you tell me why Trump administration gave $25 billion to Argentina? And it will give you a breakdown of what is happening, why the U.S. is doing this, economic stability, supporting reforms of the president, political alignment and ideology, countering the influence of China in the region, and they really have to do that. When I lived there, you might as well call it South China, because China's Belt Road Initiative and the ports that they've taken over all over the world, America was sitting behind the wheel fighting wars, and ports are being done up by China everywhere. So that's one of the big reasons. And the criticisms and risks are there, and if anybody that's ever used Chat GPT knows, you're going to get an explanation. So that's all I wanted to tell you.
All right. Well, I'm still rooting. I'm still rooting for radio shows. I'm still rooting. I know the robots are hard to beat, but I'm still rooting for humanity and purpose. Let's go to Frank from Seattle, Washington. You're on the air.
Hey, Jefferson, I can hold over. I got more to say. I was going to talk about the guy that talked about morality and ethics, but Nicholas, I wanted to give him 2 words. Gene Sharp. 198 Methods of Nonviolent Action. He was written in 1973, political scientist. This book is very relevant today, and I urge everybody to you can easily find it on YouTube or on the internet in general. But this guy was ahead of his time, and these methods are extremely relevant today. And I do agree the situation is more urgent. As to the morality and ethics of the earlier caller, I think that's maybe a long-term goal, and religion is part of that. I agree with that, but religion doesn't give you the template, the intellectual background to achieve, get to morality, because we live in our minds. As Aristotle said, our habits build character. So religion is kind of there, but it's kind of like philosophy with training wheels. It gets to conclusions without showing intellectual process that support its presumptions. It assumes rationality when really most of us are irrational most of the time, and we have to discipline our minds to be more rational. And if we use certain critical thinking approaches, we can achieve morality within our minds. For example, if we all live in our points of view, we have points of view because of our background, ethics, our background, gender, sexual orientation, whatever, and we have to break through. If we can see other people's point of view, well, that's the gateway to empathy. If we can hold ourselves to standards that we have on ourselves, standards of clarity of thought, Well, that's the gateway to integrity. If we can agree that sometimes we're wrong and we can look for the truth despite its hardships, well, that's a gateway to courage. And those are frameworks for building true ethics and morality within any democracy or support democracy. So those are the main things I wanted to say. I know you have limited time.
All right. Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate you sharing. Appreciate you listening. And one of the things I would take away and add to is I think a lot of how we define morality and is in community, is in watching other people, is with our mirror neurons, and which is also connected to your point of empathy. I could say more, but I want to see. Joe, if you have something to say for 30 seconds. If not, we'll hold you over till after the break, but you can have the last word if you want it. Joe from Oklahoma City.
I'll take it. I think Nicholas is 100% correct. I will say this. If Trump had control of the military like he does now with Pete Hegseth, our country would be under Trump's control now.
Yeah.
He would have used them in 2021.
Yeah.
We are out of time. Collective action.
What should we do about it?
We have two children. I got the perfect solution. I mentioned this, Tom. The teachers hold the key.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at any state where teachers have gone on strike, even in red states, they have come crawling on their knees. A nationwide, all union, all teachers strike because it will hurt them in the pocketbook, and that's all they care about.
Where I think both you and Nicholas are really right. This is a time to take more action than we otherwise would. It's not a time for comfort, and I agree with that really strongly. Joe, thank you so much for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Storm is Here, An American Crucible by Luke Mogelson. This is from the introduction. Hoping to stave off an encroaching despair on the morning of January 7th, 2021, I left my hotel in Washington, D.C. and took a taxi to the Lincoln Memorial. I was looking for sanctuary, and an open-air chamber designed to resemble a temple seemed as likely a place to find it as any. I'd been there once or twice before, passing between the marble columns. You weren't humbled into silence as much as welcomed by it. When I arrived this time, however, the monument was closed. Squad cars were pulling up, officers expelling a mob. Many of the people wore red MAGA hats and Trump 2020 shirts. I asked someone what had happened, It seemed that a woman had been posing for pictures with a Gadsden flag, "Don't tread on me," below a hissing snake on a yellow field, when an officer advised that such displays were not allowed. A fracas had ensued, and now the Trump supporters converged at the bottom of the steps, the same steps from which, in 1963, Martin Luther King delivered his "I Have a Dream" speech, and the crowd then began calling the officers Nazis, Marxists, and pigs. Young men in blazers waved their middle fingers. "Christ is king," they chanted. "Aren't we the pussies?" a little bald man asked. "Honestly, we're not overrunning them?" "That's when they start executing people," said a woman in her 30s, glaring hatefully at the police. It occurred to me that some of the officers impassively absorbing this abuse probably had friends in the hospital. Less than 24 hours earlier, I had watched Donald Trump tell a similar, though much larger, mob assembled on the far end of the reflecting pool that extended behind us, quote, "If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore," end quote. Thousands of people, many armed with bats, clubs, whips, and other rudimentary weapons, had proceeded to march up the National Mall. At the Capitol, they had wounded around 180 law enforcement agents, smashed through doors and windows, and frantically hunted for politicians determined to sabotage the peaceful transition of power. Some carried nooses, barked racial epithets, assaulted journalists, and called for the vice president to be lynched. On the Senate floor, I watched Trump supporters ransack desks and steal confidential documents. A bare-chested man in a horned headdress wielding a spear pronounced Mike Pence an effing traitor. Then he led the rioters in prayer. An officer who suffered a stroke after being maced would later die. Now it was not the police, but the Trump supporters who were outraged. Once again, they believed they'd been wronged. Once again, their sense of injury was blistering. The woman with the Gadsden flag was a pastor from Los Angeles. "I know that had to be Antifa," she said of the attack on the Capitol. "I know it did, because everyone here," she gestured at the livid crowd berating the police, "there's such a spirit of community." She began to weep. "How dare they?" she demanded of the officers. "What is wrong with this country? This is not my America. I don't understand." That made two of us. I could think of only one question to ask. Where do we go from here? The pastor wiped her tears. Her suffering was vast. "I will tell you this," she sobbed. "I will not turn the other cheek to what's not right. This is not right. This is not right." The first epidemic I reported on was in West Africa in 2014. Although Ebola was far more deadly and contagious than COVID-19, the international response is inadequate. Liberia's largest slum, a dense warren of crude squatter dwellings in a narrow peninsula that jutted into the Atlantic from downtown Monrovia, was a formidable early hot zone. Below a canopy of rusty sheet metal, some 80,000 denizens lacked running water, relieved themselves in the cramped gaps between walls, and repurposed detritus as a bulwark against eroding riverbanks. As the virus wiped out whole families, the Liberian military sealed off the encampments with ramparts and barbed wire. Gunships patrolled the coast. Crime spiked. Panic spread. Soldiers fired on people trying to escape. The community looked doomed. After 10 days, emissaries from the slum prevailed on the government to end the blockade. In exchange, they agreed to implement a suite of precautions, identifying and isolating sick people in their homes, tracking down their recent contacts, and vigilantly monitoring each individual for a period of 3 weeks, the maximum amount of time that the virus was known to incubate before manifesting symptoms. Normally, all this should have been the responsibility of medical professionals and epidemiologists. In the slum, though, the job fell to locals. Against most expectations, within a month, the Ebola outbreak had been contained. Monrovia was not an aberration. In the absence of rescue by the world and their own governments, which were among the poorest on the earth, West Africans proved remarkably adept at helping one another to survive. Neighborhoods mobilized, healthcare workers volunteered, secluded villages formed ad hoc task forces to oversee sanitation, quarantines, and mandatory social distancing. Education was crucial. Initially, conspiracy theories abounded. Some West Africans embraced a rumor that the virus was a ploy to solicit foreign donor money. Spiritual healers proffered metaphysical explanations for the vagaries of death and illness. In one remote hamlet I visited in Sierra Leone, the chief had been told that somewhere a commercial plane had crashed. For every passenger who died, a villager must as well. The book, The Storm is Here, by Luke Mogelson.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. This is the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Jeff Smith sitting in. Thank you so much for being here. Let you live in interesting times, or may you live in interesting times. And as we fight at this moment for the question of whether, to the extent we have had a democracy, the shreds of it will continue. What should that democracy look like? How do we get there? And what's happening out there that might be worth fighting for, in addition to what's worth fighting against? On the air, we have Lynn Davis. He's the Program Director of Healthy Democracy. He'll explain more about what that is. A way I will put it is, what might we do at the local level, including, to fight for democracy itself? Lynn, thank you for joining us. And why do you introduce Thank You Democracy in your own words?
Yeah, hey, thanks so much for having us. So we do something called a civic assembly, and this is sort of a different kind of democracy that takes everyday people selected at random from the public and puts them in positions of genuine power deep into policy making. Sometimes this happens at the local level, sometimes at the state level, sometimes at the national level. Not here in the US yet, but overseas. It's been around in this sort of current form. These civic assemblies this sort of idea has been around for about 50 years and started in the US, among other places. And but it goes back to very old ideas of more deliberative, sort of collaborative forms of decision making around the world. And the lottery, that sort of lottery process, you may recognize it from our jury system, which was inspired by processes in ancient Greece. There's also versions of it in ancient India, et cetera. And yeah, it's a way for everyday people from all walks of life to be involved deep within ownership of public policy, not just giving feedback, not one directional, not even just two directional, but deep within the making of how we govern ourselves.
Democracy, and not just with politicians.
Not just with politicians. No, often these are used for the first time as advisory bodies to city councils or legislatures, but they can act independently as well. They can serve as a substitute for existing boards or commissions or other things that we already have that we may want more representation in, or a different kind of style of deliberative decision making in. But yeah, they can act independently or as sort of very integrated within the electoral system. So
a question on my mind. So I think, by the way, and I could answer the question that I'm about to pose, and if you want to flip it back to me, it's not a challenge to you. It is not intended as a challenge to you, but it is fair. And it's fair also in the context of discussions we've been having just over the last 15, 20 minutes, which is when the risk of talking about big picture stuff when the house is on fire, when we're having discussions about what should democracy look like, or how should we raise a new generation of activists, and a very fair response comes, what are you talking about? We don't have time for this. Right now, there is a question, like, who right now is betting that there will in fact be fair elections in the next typically called midterm elections coming up in a year? So I'll put a related question to you. Why does the idea of civic assemblies matter now?
Yeah, I think it's important when we are looking at our democracy to think about the short term and the long term both at the same time. It's so hard to do, but we have put a lot of money and a lot of time into things like into election reforms, in particular, ranked choice voting, most famously campaign finance reform, sort of a little before that. Those movements are very strong and have a lot of money behind them. And in addition to other things, journalism, obviously.
Not enough. Keep going.
Well, relatively speaking to some of these other reforms, and I think that that's not enough. We're playing around the edges to some extent. It's not that they're bad. We support them often, not officially, but as individuals. But we think that there's room for thinking about something that's different, thinking that's beyond maybe the current way that we think about our system, which is built on an architecture of debate, incidentally, and all those things are still built on that architecture. This is built on an architecture, ideally, of collaboration, a different way of thinking about this. We often like to point out that this is not a reform that is propagated by or necessarily beneficial to the left or the right or the center, for that matter. It is hopefully beneficial to the public and our ability to have ownership over the decisions that affect our lives. And we need to think a little bit deeper about what maybe the concerns that we have right now across the political spectrum, incidentally, about the way our government works. And that I think a lot of those have to do with our feeling that we're not in this, that it's somebody else. It's something in the sky that's doing things to us or for us or at us, positive or negative, but it's not us. We're not using government as a tool. And a lot of the reforms that to me feel fairly superficial are not changing that relationship at all.
Yeah. So I remember a conversation I had in Trump's first term, with a guy who used to serve on my board, a guy I really respect and care about. And I was more than alarmed, and am more than alarmed by Trump, and view the current movement. And then my concern was, and I still believe that he as a person received too much attention relative to what his movement was doing. And that the movement that begat him and that he is now begetting was posed an existential threat to the most important values in America, and too many of the most important values in America. And I made this case, and he came back to me saying, "Nah, you find it's going to be more like Warren Harding, where this guy's just going to be a corrupt guy, and then he's going to be out, and then it'll be, and then we'll always remember just this time, like Teapot Dome, and we'll just move along." Now, of course, in the second term, that conversation seems quaint, and there is this time where we feel like we were at the fundament. We were some are at the barricades, and some are worried that there aren't enough barricades. And I've been wondering, and I think a lot about the next generation. That's first thought. Second thought. So first thought, big problems brewing. Big problems happening and getting worse. Second, I think about the next generation. I think about that I don't see successful social movements that do not include healthy doses of young people. And we need lots of them. And fortunately, there are some, and we need more. And I think about the conversations I have with young people, including on this program and obviously beyond.
1 minute.
And they are, and some of that is, well, what are we fighting for? Are we only fighting against oppression, tyranny? We're only fighting against Donald Trump, MAGA. We're only fighting against ICE or gutting of health care. Or is there something we're fighting for? And I like the idea of fighting for democracy. I think that is as good as we can do, rhetorically and morally. And I think part of the challenge, here's my answer to my question, we'll have a break and we'll keep you on. Thank you for joining us. That if we only say the word democracy, and what we mean by that is the current government or the recent government, or roughly speaking, how we've been doing things for the last while, it lands a little shallow. It lands a little unsatisfying. It doesn't feel like a cure to oligarchy. It doesn't feel like democracy. So the reason I appreciate you coming on the show today is to actually talk about what might democracy look like. And for those who think, well, how is that related to the current fight? I would say, I think that fight is about democracy. And we ought to have that fight about something more than, including yes, but something more than elect Democrats to Congress. Including, yes, but something more than electing Democrats to Congress. We'll be back talking about healthy democracy with Lynn Davis right after this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
What does a healthy democracy look like? What might it look like? What is worth fighting for? We'll be right back. We're on with Lynn Davis from Healthy Democracy. So, Lynn, thank you for letting me answer my question and also for answering my question of why I think it matters now. Lynn, did we lose Lynn? No, he's here. Lynn, asking you, what are some of the, well, first of all, please respond. Where am I off base? What do I leave out? Where am I stupid or absent, or where am I onto something? Lynn, can you hear us? Lynn,
I think so. It's breaking up a little bit.
Okay.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear. I heard you just fine. So, so first, just any response, not required. I can go to a question, but any response to to my diatribe?
Yeah, totally. I think you hit on a number of really interesting things. One is our sort of reliance on the individual as either an angel or a devil in our sort of system, where we tend toward a sort of celebrity mindset, I think, in politics. That's how we've all been socialized in the political world. And so we look to them as the source of hope and salvation, and as the source of everything that's wrong. And neither of those things are even remotely close to the truth. And we need to look at the systems, the design of the way things work, and to ourselves as our ability to make that better. Then you also talked about young people, and that is so essential. The number one most difficult category when we're doing this democratic lottery, we call it. We're selecting folks at random, but also representatively. So nobody's hand selected, but there's an algorithm that helps to select people that are, so they represent so it's proportional to the population on age and educational attainment and race and ethnicity and so forth. And one of, if not the hardest category is age, is young folks respond at a much lower rate to even these very proactive requests, where we're offering to pay folks oftentimes thousands of dollars to participate, and lots of support services in these unique deliberative events, to their general population. Maybe 5%, if will respond. Of the respondents will be young folks, and maybe they're actually 15% in the general population. So that what we're seeing in terms of people running for office or participating in local neighborhood associations or other community groups, or even in social movements, as you said, we see that sort of overrepresentation of older folks represented, or middle-aged folks very often. And, it's also the next generation that in a way is, I mean, obviously it's most essential for the future of our country in so many ways, but also the suffering of our faith in democracy tends so much toward the younger generations right now. I'm just turned 40, and my generation, I think, is much less likely to believe that democracy is even a good idea than my parents or grandparents. And that is an existential problem for all of us.
I want to respond to that very quickly, and then we'll also be right back. Hear what he just said, that if we're fighting against authoritarianism, if people don't have a strong sense of the better alternative, why would they fight? That we need to, in fact, build up democracy so there is something worth fighting for, so we have motivation to fight fascism.
Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Human beings have a couple of unique characteristics. The first is that we can be very tender and loving and concerned and caring toward people we perceive as being our group, us. We can also be extraordinarily violent against people that we consider to be them, if we think of them or this other as a threat. Probably the classic example of this is Adolf Hitler convincing Germans that, Jews were a threat to them and good Germans going along with the Holocaust. Well, this othering is built into our DNA. This is, ancient stuff. And the Republican Party, since the time of Nixon, when he started, picking up the white racist vote after Democrats laid it down in the 60s, the Republicans have been using this to try to other minorities in America as a political strategy. And this is really deadly stuff. There's a whole op-ed about it over at HartmannReport.com, Is Othering Human Nature's Deadliest Instinct? Check it out.
Hello there. We are back with Lynn Davis from Healthy Democracy, talking about civic juries, talking about what real democracy might look like in a battle over authoritarianism. What we just heard Lynn say, Lynn who just turned 40, he talks to young people who say, do I really believe in democracy? Do I think it's a thing? And if that is the baseline, if that is the foundation of where the current argument is happening, no wonder there feels like too much energy on the anti-democracy side, on the pro-authoritarianism side, on the pro-oligarchy side, and not enough on the pro-democracy side, because we haven't been doing that work. Say more about that, Lynn, or change the subject.
Yeah, I mean, we see a decline in faith in the idea of democracy across the board. There's this great study. I mean, this is not recent. This is since, at least in the last 20, 25 years, there's been a pretty steep decline. And I think we got over 50% of folks who said that they were dissatisfied with democracy as an idea. That was like 5 years ago. So yeah. We're deep into the world of being underwater in terms of our belief in democracy. And it's not just young people, it's just most acute among young people.
Mm-hmm. So your idea, and not just your idea, but people can look at the TED Talk on sortition. You can, heck, follow Aristotle, right? This stuff goes back. Where are exemplars that you like to hold out? What's a micro case study, quick story that helps illustrate why this works and how it works?
Yeah, I'll take a really small scale example and then maybe another big example. We just did a project in Fort Collins, Colorado, sponsored by the city government there, although also funded by other folks and a partnership of nonprofits, around a piece of property that used to be the Colorado State football stadium, now a vacant piece of land, 150, 160 acres. And it brought together a representative group of the public, a city in one room. It also had other kind of inputs, a group of stakeholders and a sort of a community ambassador program that brought in other information and traditional engagement like surveys and that kind of thing. And the assembly got together and gave a recommendation after extensive deliberation, upwards of 35 plus hours together, on what the city should do with this piece of property, hearing from a number of the different proposals from different interest groups about what should be done with this land. And they presented this proposal to City Council, and City Council has actually just put it on the ballot for the first time that we know of in the US. There's a Civic Assembly's recommendations that are going to be going directly to voters. There's another initiative, incidentally, as well, from an advocacy group that came through a traditional signature gathering process. So both of those are on the ballot. Great, more democracy, put it all out there. But it was a really exciting project, and I hope that I think that in the reporting about these ballot measures, the local media actually is doing a great job of making it clear that this went through this really unique process to get there, which is cool. So there's things like that on a small scale happening across the US, but there's also big things happening abroad. Paris, for example, has a sort of parallel city council as of the last few years, where they select by democratic lottery a group of folks. About a third of those folks kind of turn over every 6 months or so, and they set agendas for themselves in terms of what's most important that the city council may not be working on. And they write bills that in that case go to city council, and then they kind of work with the elected council in order to figure out how those should advance. They also set a participatory budgeting process, that have the agenda for that, and make other rules around participation. There's a couple other systems like that are permanent. There's one in Poland where you can get an initiative or get an assembly to happen just via signature gathering. So kind of instead of putting something directly on the ballot through an initiative, you can get an assembly to happen. The government has to pay for it. And then if that assembly gets to 80% agreement, and incidentally, that's always a requirement of these processes, super majority, not majority, we're done with majority.
Try to get closer
it's always
to
75,
consensus.
80%.
Yep.
Yeah, closer to consensus, but not forcing consensus. That's also important. Because there's some weird power dynamics that can happen when you force consensus.
You can hold out. Yep. So just before we wrap, my quick summary. I think it has these elements. You can correct me, and then I want you to say where people can find out more, what they can do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a representative group, lottery selected. Take a real problem with real information and real deliberation, and then make a real decision in a supermajority way. There's something that's closer to consensus. Lynn Davis from Healthy Democracy, where can people find out more, or what should they be doing?
Yeah, so there's a small network of advocates in hubs across the United States, and just get in touch with us. We can put you in touch with folks that are talking to their local council members or legislators, or having to organize small things in places probably near you. HealthyDemocracy.org is our website, or info@healthydemocracy.org. And we'd love to put you in touch with the many activists that are out there that are trying to sort of get at this sort of root cause, change the game kind of structural stuff. Thank you.
99.25.
We are listening to the Thom Hartmann program and watching it. Thank you to Lynn Davis from Healthy Democracy. What are we fighting for? Well, maybe that's something. We'll be right back.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is by John Pavlovitz. It's titled, If God is Love, Don't Be a Jerk, Finding a Faith That Makes Us Better Humans. This is from the introduction titled, You Had One Job. If you want a good laugh, Google the phrase, you had one job. The results are hilariously tragic parade of seemingly impossible fails, unfathomably poor planning, and face-palming inducing human error. A piece of melted cheese on top of a fast food burger bun. The word stop misspelled on a street crossing. A keep to the right sign with its arrow facing left. A toilet lid inexplicably installed below the seat itself. It's strange stuff. Seeing these stupefying train wrecks and task execution tends to elicit two responses. Usually making you feel a little bit better about yourself while simultaneously wanting to track down the culprits in an effort to understand how they managed to neglect the primary duty assigned to them. We begin to speculate. Were they temporarily distracted? Did they not properly comprehend the instructions? Did they feel as though someone above them in the chain of command dropped the ball? Were they just plain lazy? When people miss the point so spectacularly, we want to know how and why. Because that kind of failure feels impossible from the outside. It seems unfathomable to get the main thing wrong, and seeing it happen sparks our curiosity. I imagine Jesus knows well the curiosity that comes with watching people give clear direction lose their way. As a longtime Christian by aspiration, if not always in practice, I often envision an exasperated Jesus coming back, and the first words out of his mouth to his followers as his feet hit the pavement being, You had one job, love. So what happened? I wonder what massive wave of excuses and rationalizations would come flooding from the mouths of the faithful multitude in front of him, how they might justify their mistreatment of the assailed humanity in their care, the verbal and theological gymnastics they'd attempt to avoid culpability for their own cruelty. Would they stridently recite him a verse from Leviticus? Would they blame the liberal media for morally corrupting America? Would they talk about people's wicked lifestyle choices? Would they argue that they were loving the sinners in their midst, but simply hating their sin? Would they frantically offer up the same platitudes and parrot back the same partisan talking points that they've gotten used to brandishing on social media and proffering in Sunday school classes? And if all else failed to convince him, would they quote Jesus to himself in a desperate Hail Mary effort to pass the buck to him for what they did or failed to do while supposedly standing up for him? And there, fully seen in the piercing gaze of the namesake of their very faith tradition, with all their justifications and excuses exhausted and only their fully exposed hearts left, would any of their responses be sufficient reasons for refusing to love? When that was the singular task and primary commandment that he left them responsible for tending to? In my less compassionate moments, I admit that I like to picture it not going well for them. I know it's far less than admirable, let alone Christ-like. But some days my heart strangely warms at the possibility of a few billion brimstone-breathing evangelists, sanctimonious conservative politicians, and plank-eyed judgmental Christian neighbors all having to explain themselves in a sanctified flop-swept moment they can't exegete or gaslight themselves out of, and they all get what they have coming to them. But my self-righteous revelry doesn't last long. The mirror calls me out as I remember what I think I know about Jesus, and that rescues me from full-blown, unabated hubris. I begin to wonder what my excuses might be, how I'd spin the enmity I manufacture here, what story I'd come up with for not doing the one task we both know compromises a disciple's job description. And if I really believe what I'm supposed to believe, are any of my justifications sufficient? If God is love, and if Jesus is the perfect expression of that love, and if I'm supposedly trying to follow that Jesus, how could I be so love-impaired so frequently? How do I miss the singular point so consistently? It's not as if I didn't know what I was signing up for, like some lengthy online user agreement I blindly accept in haste, missing the bombshell fine print underneath. Having read the Gospels a few million times, give or take a few 100,000, I know the primary commandment is not something I need to excavate from cumbersome layers of foreign language translations and cultural mores of the time. Jesus himself clearly laid out the most important commandment for me and for everyone who's ever cracked open a Bible, and even most people who've never cracked open a Bible. And so we'd all understand what's being asked of us going in, so there would be no post-altar call buyer's remorse or deathbed claims of a sucker punch, bait and switch. Loving God and neighbor and self is the elemental stuff of Christian prayers, songs, T-shirts, and bumper stickers, and we know that. But as the master Morpheus said to protege Neo in the first and only truly great Matrix film, there is a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. Love is the path that Jesus laid out for us. The book, John Pavlovitz's If God is Love, Don't Be a Jerk, Finding a Faith That Makes Us Better Humans. And tag you're it.
We're back. Thank you for being back. Let's go straight to Beth. We'll go straight to your call, see if we can clear the board so all your brilliance can be shared. Beth from Chicago, Illinois. You're on the air.
Hey, Jeff. I am here. I'm having the blues because I'm in Chicago. Plus, I've been waiting an hour and a half. So because I love you. So I'm here. Listen, I want to tell you, this is like it's an urgent message to all blue cities, and maybe people have read this, but you're your guy who screens calls. He hadn't heard of it yet, and a lot of my other connections. I'm a grassroots activist, also former professor, and I have an opinion also on the strength of youth. But what I know right now is that in Rogers Park, which is a little north of where I am, I'm in a mostly Hispanic neighborhood, and so I look out for my neighbors, etc. Well, what happened was two guys in Rogers Park were sitting on their front porch. They're picked up on the 9th of October by ICE, and they're just being racial profiled. They're literally picked up, right, because they have brown skin. And so all our blue cities should be alerted to this, that they said to the ICE agent, said, where are your papers? And they said, we don't have papers with them. They're in our house, and we're not at the house, or we don't have them. My parents are dead. And the bottom end, and this is how it ended up. They were scaring him and intimidating him. But the point was that one of them could prove it. They had a database in their cars, in the car that they were driving around, these two guys in. And this can be seen in the Chicago Tribune and in MSN.com. So those are two news outlets that back my story up, is that one guy was proven that he did indeed have he was like a foreign national, so was considered legal, but he doesn't have a lot of money, and so he got a $130 ticket. The other person was deported, and we don't know anything about it, but the National Immigrant Justice Center in Chicago told the outlet that it really is part of a push to ensure immigrants register with authorities because of Trump's administration and keep all their documents with them at all times. And this is purely, no other president has done this besides Trump right now. Yeah. So I just want to send this out because you have a big platform.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. And documenting abuses of power, hopefully not just for history, hopefully to help motivate people to do things, hopefully so that we can rebuild media. Like I am both more pessimistic and more optimistic than other people. What I mean by that is I am more pessimistic in the near term, and that I think that they have seized so many levers of power. They have toppled so many opponents that it's sometimes worse than we think. But I hesitate saying that because I don't want to quell anybody's hope, but I do. Exactly. But I do overall kind of have faith in humanity, and I think justice can win over time. I think it's not only the arc of history is long, but it's very bumpy. But I do think it bends towards better things and towards justice. But Beth, thank you for that, and thanks for being part of this community.
About, as a former professor at Columbia here in Chicago for film students. So when Trump had his first term, I don't even know if this was legal or not legal. I just said, I hope you all know what's in store if you don't study democracy and what can be taken away. And I told them about the National Endowment for the Arts. And I said, raise your hand if anybody knows what the NEA does and what democracy does for filmmakers and artists like us. If you want to be a filmmaker, then you're going to have to, I basically said, I was like, you're going to have to study democracy and literally vote for it, because that no one else is going to stand up for your rights, because in film, most of us are all union. And secondly, I mean, it's no one, and the thing is, they didn't get it at all, but I pushed it enough where I said, well, if you can't convict yourself to make these convictions of free speech when you want to make your documentary or your film, you're going to be in trouble. So if you literally have a teacher that can compare it to what they're doing in their life and how it can affect them adversely, then I think it's a positive thing. And if we don't include them in our future, like our 16-year-olds and up, like you said, to 35, we're insane. No, we must keep them, because I literally believe that because I mentor people now that I'm not teaching anymore, and they call me up. So I think that they're integral to the future. I mean, you see.
Amen, Beth, and I agree strongly. And thank you for the call.
Can I say one more thing?
No, we got it. I got to go on.
I got an hour and a half.
No, you've had 5 minutes and 45 seconds. You get 20 more.
Okay. No. The only thing is that, okay, I keep thinking creatively, like, okay, what would they do during the resistance in France or whatever, why is there, or there probably is some sort of law enforcement that is spying on the inside. This is not paranoia. This is actually a part of resistance of ICE. And I guarantee you that there are former military literally getting a reconnaissance for war crimes.
Yeah. All right, I've got to go. I've got to go to the next caller, Beth, because we want to try to clear the board.
On that. I hope you can expound on that.
But
thank you.
Thank you so much. Be well. Tom from Boston, Massachusetts, you're on the air.
Hi, Jefferson. Thank you. Jefferson, earlier you asked a question of your guest about what the kids today should be doing or thinking, and came to mind two things I think about these days. One is radical theory. Back in the day, this turned out to be just radical theory by the elite owners. And, like the Koch brothers putting foundations into the university structure and screwing this thing up and making it biased. So I saw Weckler once on Monday. He was in Boston on a tour, and he basically said, seize the moment. He saw an opportunity, lost. He did it again, and he won. They got a seat at the table. He talked about the triangle they formed between government, the owners, whether you'd be the communists, the Russians, the Soviets, and the union workers. They got a seat. They were at they first. So all I'm saying is we have an opportunity Saturday. It's got to be peaceful. It's got to be strong, and it's got to say no and put our foot down. But it's got to be big numbers because the politicians don't want to see, discourse in the street. And they respond to that. They responded in the 60s. They'll respond again if we're in the streets. But we cannot allow this dictator, this white nationalist, he wants civil war. It's like he's got Putin in his pocket. He's just look at it all. So I'm just saying the other branch of those two, what they should do, other than seize the moment right now, because that's what they got to do. The rest of it's all bullshit. We got to be in the street. Got to be busy. The news media doesn't even. I hadn't even heard about Saturday anywhere. Well, I'm a very busy guy, but we got to be there. The other thing is equity. The owners got multi-layers of hiding in the corporations. These owners need to be challenged. And we're the most unequal country we've ever been in the history of everything, past the Gilded Ages by great numbers. Yep. We need to get them focused on the top, and they get their equity, they get their seat at the table so they can be happier, and we won't be so stressed out. And put things into proportion, show things like, billboards. That's the other question, if I can just say, when Air America came on, I saw those billboards, and I was there from the beginning. They work. So, you know what? Somehow we got to get something together to get billboards. I forget what I was thinking we should say up there right now.
If you think of it, if you have a good billboard idea, send it to us. And thank you, Tom. Let me respond to those very quickly before we go to break. So, our two things in reverse order: equity. It's something to fight for. And I agree. I think that as people get rooted more in selfishness and try to protect just theirs, and we build a politics of just selfishness, that it promotes an opportunity, gives us an opportunity to see the limits of selfishness as a policy idea, and that. And I'll just point you to the TED Talk on Richard Wilkinson's TED Talk and his book, The Spirit Level, which isn't about spirituality. It's literally about that when things fall out of equity, when the measurement of equity falls out, societies start to collapse. It's just a bad news for everybody. But the other is your point in the streets. Yeah, this is a time for people to do more and to be visible. And so that everybody in this country needs to know somebody who is active in resisting authoritarianism, who is not just coddling people who are taking a bow for having elected Trump and putting it in this circumstance. A significant majority of people are opposed to Trump, but he's still gathering enough levers of power to make it hard to oust his team. So yes, that means the streets. It's also, LinkedIn is too quiet, it's too professional. I do encourage people to post there. Facebook, heck yes, and also new media outlets, including communities like this. And we've got to find more and more communities, more and more pockets where we can bring people in of all ages, including young leaders, to bring them along and to build numbers. We have to build those numbers. And my one little tip, no Kings protest this weekend, bring a friend, maybe even a young friend.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
My dad does a good job of this. He tries to recruit a couple young people to come with him each time, including to the No Kings protest this weekend. We'll be back. And we are back. Let's go to George from Cripple Creek, Virginia. You're on the air.
Hey, Jefferson. How you doing? Today, Belarusian President Lukashenko warned that if President Trump supplies Tomahawk nuclear cruise missiles to Ukraine, that would lead to nuclear war, since the Russians wouldn't know whether the Tomahawks are armed with conventional warheads or nuke warheads. And Putin has already stationed tactical nukes in Belarus, and in September, Belarus and Russia held a exercise, saying, how powerful these nuclear warheads would be actually deployed. And on Friday, President Trump's going to meet with President Zelensky of Ukraine and render his decisions on supplying Tomahawks to Ukraine, but I doubt he'd supply him with nuclear warheads.
Yep. No, I appreciate it, George. I'm going to keep it cooking so that everybody has a chance today. Let's go to Kenyatta from Los Angeles. Go ahead, Kenyatta.
I just wanted to kind of focus on something that is a misnomer, but I think it's a potentially dangerous one. You've been talking throughout the show about these No Kings parades and protests over the weekend, and I'm sure that's a noble cause. But what I wanted to point out, Jefferson, is that I don't believe that Donald Trump thinks he's a king. Mm-hmm. I think Donald Trump thinks he's God. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump has a history of using language that's very messianic. He, 2019, in discussing trade deals with China, he looked up towards the heavens and referred to himself as the chosen one. During the 2024 Republican convention, he said that that God saved him and it was God's will. He's constantly sharing social media posts, videos that explicitly compare him to Jesus. In the 70s, there was a group of black poets that were also musicians. They were called the Last Poets. And they did a very famous piece called The White Man's Got a God Complex. I don't think at all. I think this guy really believes that he's some type of divine entity, and that makes it even more dangerous. What say you?
Yeah, no, I think here's what I would say before we go to the end of this segment. I think Trump is the center of his own universe. And so you said whether he's king or whether he's God, the way I'd put it is I don't think he's limited to the concepts of other people. I think he sees the world as he is the center of his universe, and he doesn't conceive really of the universe without him. And to that degree, I think you're onto something, that God is closer to the king. The king either rules over or serves people. I think that's not even how he sees it. He's like a shark that goes around and eats things. He just tries to accrete power, attention, and money, and reward allies that help him get those things, and punish people who are in the way of that, and rinse and repeat, tit for tat, tat for tit. And so, yeah, to that degree, I think it's, to that degree, I get your point, Kenyatta.
Well, hopefully Father Karras will show up at one of those protests just in case.
There you go. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Other countries enjoy benefits like free health care in college, modern mass transit, affordable housing, food, and drugs. They also have inexpensive internet and phone service without companies listening and selling their information. Schools that don't need to mention school shooters. Streets and parks filled with pedestrians and children instead of tents and homeless people. We, on the other hand, have the world's largest collection of billionaires. Most Americans probably didn't realize this was the choice they were making back in the election of 1980 when Reagan and Bush promised morning in America. But here we are. We have been just basically sold out to the billionaires by all these years of Republican, Reaganomics. What do we do about it? Well, there's a lot we can do about it, and it starts with getting politically active. There's a great op-ed about this over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled, America Chose Wealth Over Well-Being. Check it out.
Back. We've got moments left, but let's see if we can give everybody who's been patiently waiting a chance. Tom from Media, Pennsylvania, who likes to call and promote Trump. Go ahead, Tom.
I'm a moderate. I'm more of a third-way Democrat, actually, but there's no such thing as a moderate. But I hear this mantra about Republicans/conservatives being, much less charitable and kind than Democrats liberals that are much more kind and generous. But, all the studies show that in terms of charitable giving across all levels of income, Republicans/conservatives give much, significantly more, per person. So how do you...
So Tom, first of all, send me the data. Second of all, send me the data if you peel away giving to church, and if you peel away giving to church, I'd like to see that data also, and send me the data, then we can talk about it. I don't think that a particular political designation has a monopoly on virtue. What I do think today, and what I have said today, is that I am deeply concerned. I assume you are deeply concerned at the tenor of the discussion, the kind of discussion among young Republicans. Yes, that's something that you don't promote.
Well, I think that I haven't seen the young Republicans.
So you should. Take a look. Look at Sue's stack.
I will.
Take a read at Sue's stack and look at what was passing as discourse in that community. And the thing I would say is,
how do I get a hold of you? How do I get a hold of you on your website? There, I know I have a website. I can respond because I responded a while ago to you. I never got a response back. But
yeah, or you can send it into the show.
Okay,
Right.
The show doesn't have an address, so that's not going to work either. I can't get an address from the show.
Oh,
so I'll do it on. I can't get an address on the show. If you want me to give it to me, that's fine. But I can't get an address for the show.
Well, I think there's an email. I mean, I know people reach out to the show here, so that shouldn't be too hard, Tom. But I want to get to the next call. But yeah, the screen. I'll put you on hold, and the screener can help get you connected. Let's go to Calvin. Let's go to Carol. Carol from Seattle, you're on the air.
Hi. Hey. We have 72 million people that are unregistered, and so when I go to the march, I'm going to bring ways to get people registered.
There you go.
There you go. And that's the thing. We got to get more people to join. We can't be so picky. We're not marrying each other. We're just voting together. So big tent. Time to put our little fussiness aside. We don't have a lot of choices. That type of thing.
No, I love it. I love it. And when you register voters, do you have a favorite first line?
Well, I mean, it depends on if I'm doing it for King County. You can't be. You have to be nonpartisan. But I think I'm going the other way. I basically talk about FDR and about why we're all here and how we made America great the second time, because when we found it, it was already great. So let's just acknowledge that.
So
and
I'll give. Here's my. It won't come across rocket science after I'm done with it, but I'm going to give you my best tip on voter registration. So we used to run voter registration drives, and we'd have young people come in who joined our political leadership program, and would and I'd sort of make a guess of who was going to be the best voter registrar, and I was wrong every time. And because I'd sort of think the person it would be was going to be the person who was maybe had some particular charismatic energy or seemed extroverted. And both times that I remember making those guesses, I didn't make them publicly, I just made them in my own head. I remember two people that were the best in their respective years, that they were the best, and they were both kind of introverted people. And I asked them what they did, and I looked into what they did better than other people, and the difference was they asked everybody. They just kept asking, and they didn't stop asking, and they didn't get bummed out. They just kept on going, and they kept on going, and they kept on going. And that has reached a point of ideology for me. The key to voter registration is just asking, asking, and asking, and asking, and asking. So, Carol, thank you for asking.
I do agree. I think we both proved our points that we can't be as picky as we used to be.
There you go, Carol. Yeah. Thank you. Calvin, you got like 20 seconds.
The Supreme Court was three of those was voted in with only 50 votes. Can they bring the budget down to, without using the Democrats as an excuse and go to 50 votes?
You're saying can they get the budget done without
use, like they did with the changing the goalposts for the Supreme Court?
Yeah, they could go to some extremes to change Senate rules, but then they'd be loath to do that because then it could be done to them. They still might, but they'd be somewhat loath. Calvin, I want to say thanks. I want to say thanks to everybody who's been listening. We got to everybody. Thank you to the staff who puts on this show. Thanks to all of you. And I do hear the urgency, and I feel the urgency. And also want to make sure we think about yes now and also tomorrow. I think there could be one. 202-808-9925. I will be with you tomorrow. You can call in then. And I appreciate you. The Coalition of Benevolently Irrational Good People doing good things for no good reason, and you are priceless. Definition of priceless, worth a lot, not for sale. Back with you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.